Oh my gosh, 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 oh my gosh. Did you see that part where Luna was like...
And Discord's all like...
And Celestia is like, Princess Twilight.
And then... Oh! Okay. Glad we got that out of our systems.
Let's do this thing. Right off the bat, I'm gonna call this the second best two-part episode in the show, right after the return of Harmony. In terms of concept and execution, it stands high above most of the show's plot and adventure-centric arcs. This is the first time MLP seems to be sure-handedly setting out to deliver a narrative and establish a firm continuity.
It does so through a number of surprisingly welcome retcons, showing that the writers may have recognized some of the plot incongruencies of the previous seasons and sought to more firmly establish a core narrative moving forward. I know a lot of us were hoping that Twilight's flight scene at the end of Magical Mystery Cure was some kind of weird fluke, as Equestria Girls seem to establish. The writers have delivered on tying Twilight's wings into her new character arc of learning to be a proper ruler.
There's also a sense of subtly rebooting the Discord redemption arc from its original rushed form into a more broad take towards proper reformation. If we subbed out the end of Keep Calm and Flutter On, where Discord seems to have made a full change of heart, and imagine a more subtle attempt to play along, his attitude in the new season is closer to what would result. He still seems to be tricky and mysterious, with a sense that he's not really reformed at heart, but has the potential to be. Letting him off of the elements of Harmony's leash will mean a much more interesting character arc, and he might even get to be reformed as a recurring character, exactly as I said he should have been in the first place. If they deliver on the Discord narrative I've always wanted, I'm going to be fucking ecstatic.
The plot developments surrounding the journey for the 6 keys also suggest a lot more adventure to come in this season. We'll probably be seeing many new locations across Equestria. Moreover, the 6 key storyline suggests that each pony will have their own little adventure to get their own key. This is great because historically the show's adventure arcs tend to focus on Twilight Sparkle, so now each pony should get their own adventure in the limelight. Say it with me, folks. Full season story arc. I'm actually kind of surprised at how hype I am for this concept since, as I'm sure you know, usually I'm not a fan of the adventure arcs. But that's usually due to pacing. If they can keep a continuing narrative going for the entire season, though, time constraints shouldn't be an issue anymore. I'm hoping they'll be able to pull this off.
The premiere episodes altogether carried this big sense of fresh beginnings. These retcons and story structure setups lay the groundwork of a stronger season-long narrative. The whole episode deals with looking back both on what's happened before in the series and even looking back into the history of Equestria, as if the show were setting its past affairs in place so that it can cast off into new territory. The arc of learning the magic of friendship is over. Twilight is an alicorn now, so the questions are, how does friendship persist? What happens when friends begin to change and grow into their adult roles? In this episode, we see the first signs of Twilight stepping into her role as a princess, as well as the first glimpses and worries about how this could affect the group dynamic. Altogether, this premiere has laid an amazing groundwork for the season to come, along with being a superb episode in its own right. Don't you agree, Tom?
Yeah.
Tom?
Hmm?
I feel like there's something you're not telling me.
No, it's nothing. This episode's great. I'm really excited for season 4.
Tom.
Up until they entered the Everfree Forest, the pacing was the best it's ever been in a My Little Pony story-driven episode. And then, It's
okay, Tom. You can say it. This is a safe place.
The pacing went to shit. Friendship is Magic has a long history of dropping the ball in the third act when it comes to these multi-part stories, and while the issue is less distracting here than it was in the main 6's first foray into the Everfree, it does still stumble a bit. I think the problem for me stems from an emotional disconnect due to, yet again, poor pacing. The entire first episode of this arc subtly leads up to this confrontation that happens in the Everfree Forest, with the remaining 5 continually showing that they still haven't come to terms with Twilight being a princess, and are still trying to figure out how to handle her new position. When shit gets real, they no longer see her as just their friend, but now as an important asset to all of Equestria, and begin weighing this aspect into their decision-making, hence their suggestion to Twi to stay in Ponyville, lest something happen to her as well. Dejected, Twilight takes off, but Discord, of all characters, convinces her to reunite with her friends. The problem is that this series of events in the episode barely takes longer to play out than my quick summary. We go from confrontation, to sadness, to rekindled vigor in the span of 2 minutes. And as a result, none of these emotional states have any time to establish themselves and resonate with the viewer, so this entire segment, that's supposed to be the emotional crux of this story arc, completely falls flat and carries very little weight.
It's okay, Tom. It's okay. No episode is perfect. Except Applebuck season.
And Suited for Success?
That one too.
You saw it too though, right? Surely you recognize some flaws.
But of course, the episode's emotional climax happens way too quickly and has almost no kick. The overprotectiveness and increased regard for Twilight is established early on, but it doesn't pay off in a meaningful way. Twilight's friends had a legitimate point with their argument in the forest, but it wasn't explored with any depth. If there's a lesson in this episode, I didn't learn it, and all the callbacks to season 1, while cool, didn't amount to much emotionally. I also thought the magical plot device potion was straight out of nowhere. There could have at least been some form of subtle foreshadowing of Zeccora's appearance, or even of the potion itself. You'd think Twilight would worry about her secondary mentor's safety, considering her home is in danger. However, as you said during our simultaneous live tweet extravaganza, the contrivance was worth it for the plot developments.
And let's take a moment to touch on those badass plot elements.
Holy balls, he's alive again.
This arc was jam-packed with tons of world building, and fleshed out a lot of the lore that the series has referenced and touched upon over the last 3 seasons, but never really got around to going into. The most obvious instances of this are the flashbacks that Twilight was privy to as a result of the plot device potion. Getting a glimpse at Everfree in its prime, seeing the battle of Nightmare Moon versus Celestia, with a DBZ-style energy wave clash no less, and even a look at Discord's downfall in the beginning of the Celestial Sisters' reign were all awesome bits of lore that finally have some legitimate grounding from the show itself. However, I think by far the most interesting point on display was the Tree of Harmony. My mind just started going in a billion different directions with this thing. The fact that the elements weren't just an ancient artifact that the Celestial Sisters discovered without consequence just makes the elements themselves so much more interesting. Their retrieval was a conscious act of desperation. They were the only weapons powerful enough to take on Discord, and yet it seems that Celestia and Luna knew that removing them from the tree was a risk, knowing that it would be weakened as a result. The duo intentionally chose long-term consequence in order to provide short-term results. The elements were a gambit, not just mere objects of inconsequential salvation. The episode begins answering a question I didn't even think the show would even bother attempting to address: the source of magic in Equestria. The Tree of Harmony is, by all accounts, the most powerful living thing in the world of My Little Pony. It's not only what keeps the magic of the Everfree Forest at bay, but also what produced the elements of harmony themselves, up until this point inconquerable magical artifacts. The existence of the tree goes a long way to humble the Celestial Sisters, and Alicorns in general, as they are much smaller in scale than what we may have first expected. Celestia and Luna had nothing to do with the creation or even the unlocking of the elements. They were merely borrowing the power of a superior force. Another interesting question to consider: if Discord, the reigning creature at the time of this occurrence, is the spirit of chaos, is the tree the spirit of harmony, and thus Discord's opposite? MLP seems to imply that there are two forces in its universe: chaos and harmony. Discord, obviously, is the representation of chaos, and up until this point it seemed that Celestia and Luna were harmony, and then the main six once the elements passed to them. However, the tree itself is stronger than all of these characters combined. The cast that we've been following for the past 3 seasons aren't the embodiments of harmony, merely its agent. If this is the case, then it may also explain why the elements of harmony were effective against Discord when nothing else was. The ruling sisters took the Tree of Harmony's fruit and used the spirit of harmony's power against its inverse: Discord, the spirit of chaos.
Cool story, bro. You know what I really loved about this ep? The presentation.
You would. Not that I disagree.
Friendship is Magic has looked great from day one, but there's been a marked progression of quality as it goes along. The Season 4 premiere has been polished to a mirror shine that could contend with some of the best-looking hand-drawn shows on TV. The Celestia and Luna models seem to have been subtly touched up, and there's a very grand sense of framing that pervades even more of the episode than usual. The effects are totally badass, with scene after scene of unique and atmospheric lighting. These are easily the most visually tonal episodes of the show. And can I reiterate that up until the unfortunate Everfree Forest scenes, the episode has this amazingly natural flow like nothing the series has ever achieved. One of the show's strong points has always been to contain very fast jokes and character moments that don't break the flow of the episode, often happening on the other part of the screen from whoever's talking. There's this scene in front of the town hall in part 1 that shows all the characters interacting so naturally that I had to take a step back and remember that this is a thing which a team of people made and not just an organically occurring situation.
Indeed. Hey, you know what I love? I love how Applejack and Rarity get the most support dialogue in this episode. You know, the roles they've always been best to fill.
You know what I love? How all the dudes in this episode sound like they eat gravel for breakfast and lunch.
You know what I love? How Spike has slowly turned into the deadpan version of Pinkie Pie, with his fourth wall breaks and access to hammer space.
You know what I love? I love how Twilight's freakouts now have altitude.
You know what I love? My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic.
You know what I love? All of you. Castlemania is typical MLP fluff, with a slight edge thanks to the season-long story arc. On the surface, it's an episode where nothing really happens in terms of character or plot progression, and I can't say there's any dialogue or animation beats worth writing home about. This is the writing debut of Josh Haber, and while he seems to have a basic grasp of the characters, he hasn't really done anything with them. I do like the choice to center on pairings of Rainbow Dash and Applejack and Fluttershy and Rarity, since I've always had the sense that these pairs would hang out regularly, but it doesn't amount to much. To explain why this episode's dialogue falls flat, I'm gonna pull on something way out of any show's league and mention one of my favorite quotes from Roger Ebert on the subject of pulp fiction, namely that the film's dialogue is great because it's about something. What Ebert meant by that is that not all of the dialogue was only in service of explaining the plot. Pony is usually pretty good about having its characters casually converse and mention things that aren't immediately relevant to the plot at hand, but in this episode it feels like every line of dialogue is aimed at the viewer, explaining to us what's going on rather than aimed at one another. How many times does Rarity remind us that she's here to restore tapestries, or Fluttershy remind us of what terrible fate could befall Angel Bunny, yet neither of them ever seems to actually be paying attention to what the other is saying. About 10 minutes into the episode, I got my mom to sit down and watch it with me, and I started trying to deduce if I needed to explain what had happened so far. Then, Rarity mentioned her restoration project, Fluttershy stressed the importance of finding Angel, Applejack and Rainbow Dash agreed that whoever stayed in the castle longer was most daring pony, and Twilight mused about how she still hadn't found the book she was looking for. I could have jumped into the episode here and implicitly understood what had happened before with no problem. Tonally, the episode goes for a Scooby-Doo vibe, which is a thing that I've never understood. We know that the characters aren't in danger, so the horror beats are pointless, and I don't think there's much funny about characters predictably getting scared of things. Plus, we've already had much better episodes about ponies being paranoid over their surroundings. I feel like Scooby-Doo type episodes of cartoons are more a play on nostalgia these days than any guided attempt at affecting a legitimate tone, but that's neither here nor there. The aspects of this episode which actually feel noteworthy relate more to the overarching plotline than to any of the individual stories of the ponies wandering into the castle. No one cares about Rarity's restoration project or who most daring pony is, but the question about what's in the box still looms overhead, and this episode gives us some pretty big hints about the season's possible continuity. Yesterday, Cookie Cutter shared a prediction with me that kind of blew my mind, since I hadn't seen it mentioned in any of the analysis videos I watched of the premiere. Her prediction was that we will soon be introduced to a season-long villain for the main six to fight. Initially, this was based on the perplexing lack of a new villain in the season premiere, and the fact that Discord's seeds had just now decided to sprout after all these years, right after Twilight's ascension. It seems unlikely that this was mere coincidence, especially with Discord's unreliable nature. If the season-long villain really is the Pony of Shadows, as clued at in episode 3, then it justifies both the use of the Nightmare Moon flashback in the premiere, as well as the use of the Two Sisters Castle as a location in this episode. Our new villain is likely a remnant of Nightmare Moon, who was formerly fought exclusively through use of the elements of harmony, which have now been locked inside the Tree of Harmony. We've seen fragments of Nightmare Moon as a villain in the MLP comics already, so there's even precedent to the idea. It would be interesting and more than a little refreshing to see a full villain arc as opposed to a villain who only shows up in the final episodes. Maybe this villain will be more fleshed out and better integrated into the overall storyline. It would also put a lot more pressure on the main six to locate all the keys and open the mystery box before the villain can enact whatever evil plan they may have in store. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. For the time being, this is all speculation. One more thing Castlemania sets up, following in the tradition of the third episodes of the first and second seasons, is this season's vehicle for delivering moral messages. Now that the main six no longer have the princess to answer to, they've decided to start answering to one another by keeping a shared diary. It's an interesting setup and surprisingly smooth transition from the previous system, so I like it, though it's gonna leave a lot of nostalgia for the phrase Dear Princess Celestia. I can't say I particularly liked or disliked Castlemania overall. I honestly got more excited over the Castlevania reference in the title than I did over watching anything in the episode itself. Next week we'll have a new Dave Polsky episode, so I expect the pot to be stirred at least, for better or for worse. Let's see what you got, Season 4. In my experience, opinion can be an incredibly fickle thing, dependent primarily on personal decision-making more than any kind of natural law. There's an extent to which we naturally gravitate towards liking or disliking things based on who we are as people, but there's also a more close-up level on which we consciously decide which things we're going to like or dislike, whether we frame it that way or not. Many people devise a set of rules, strict or vague, to structure their feelings cleanly. Some have opinions of quality separate from their own likes and dislikes, as implicitly understood via greater cultural context. Some people can easily discern their opinions of the quality or likability of a work, while for many it can become an incredibly complex decision the moment they have to take a step back and look at it. And this is why we have phrases like first impressions are everything, because often our gut reactions are a key mechanism in helping us to pick a direction for our opinions. For instance, I'm sure that if I sat down and tried hard enough, I really could find a lot to like about any of those 400 anime I dropped, but my gut reactions to them were so negative that I could easily dismiss them out of hand and move on to things that I more obviously liked. It's when you're forced to slow down and really grind your mind against a piece of media that things start to get a little more complicated. Such as when there's a new episode of your favorite show that you feel you're supposed to like in spite of negative gut reaction. There's suddenly a complex web of decisions to make, and while it's easy to be glib and make snap decisions, the proximity of the work to your life might make you sit back and try to hash things out a little more clearly. I didn't like Castlemania the first time I watched it, and I could have left it at that alone, but I'm interested both in the fact that so many people really love this episode and in that disliking an episode of My Little Pony has a little bit of weight for me. I know that can be hard to relate to for some people, but believe me when I say that the moment your passion, livelihood, and the majority of your friendships are formed around a cartoon show, you start to put a little more thought into the nuance of your feelings towards it than you might otherwise. In my analysis videos, the question at the forefront of my mind is typically, why do I feel the way that I do? And I typically seek to simply answer this. My initial reaction to Castlemania was one of lukewarm indifference, so I sought to explain and reflect my feelings. However, upon noticing that so many people loved this episode, I got interested in looking at it as though my initial reaction had never occurred. In the interest of keeping this post organized, I'm going to break it into two numbered lists. First, things I can like about this episode, and second, things I can hate about this episode. Starting with the former. 1. It is an episode of My Little Pony, meaning that it is visually appealing, full of characters that I love, and made by a team of spectacular folks whom I admire. I'm grouping all of these aspects together because they are things that I can like about any episode of MLP, so they aren't really that helpful when it comes to comparing episodes against one another. Number 2, it is the debut of a new writer who leaves a distinct mark on the series with their unique sense of pacing. Number 3, it continues the storyline of Season 4, which I am invested in. Number 4, it is set in a highly interesting location that I've hoped to see explored for quite some time. I'm a big fan of architecture, especially when it's in ruins, so there were moments that visually interested me. Number 5, Applejack and Rainbow Dash are shown to hang out, just as I thought they should, and don't forget, Pinkie was hanging out with them too, which feels appropriate. This is what these three do when they're bored as fuck. Number 6, Rarity and Fluttershy are shown to hang out, which we've known that they do regularly, but haven't seen them do enough. Rarity continues her penchant for hyperbole, which I enjoy in some kind of weird meta fashion. Also, Fluttershy makes a face. Number 7, the awesome setup of this scene, which Tommy Oliver totally broke down awesomely in his own video on the episode. Number 8, Angel Bunny is adorable and hilarious throughout the episode. Number 9, learning about the history of the castle as a giant play place for young Princess Luna. Number 10, old pony armor is pretty cool. Number 11, that moment when Rarity screams because the tapestry got torn rather than out of fear. Number 12, Andrea Libman's Fluttershy performance really shines in this episode. Number 13, Twilight's almost godlike control over the feelings and actions of her friends in this episode strengthens her correlation with Jeff Winger from Community. The scene wherein she walks with all of them stuck to her feels right out of that show. Number 14, Pinkie Pie is adorable and hilarious in the organ scene, and we get more of the show's legendary group reaction shot moments. Number 15, the tradition of 3rd episodes in a full season introducing a new system for delivering lessons continues. And number 16, possible hints of a full season villain. Now, let's list the things that I can hate about this episode. Number 1, why the fuck is the Everfree Forest suddenly a peaceful place that ponies can just walk through in small groups? Even without evil vines growing everywhere, the forest is home to crocodiles, manticores, cockatrices. Yes, the inconsistency of this forest's danger has been a series-long issue, but considering that the previous episode not only featured the forest being incredibly dangerous, but had a lesson basically about not splitting up, it seems daft that all of these ponies would wander into the forest in small groups without at least asking the others if they'd like to come along. I get Rainbow Dash and Applejack going, but seeing Rarity and Twispike go in alone just bothers the hell out of me. Number 2, the bees look terrible. Number 3, Rarity's reason for dragging Fluttershy out to the castle is contrived as fuck. Where did she hear these rumors about ancient tapestries? The last group to have ventured to this castle had Rarity fucking in it. Did she not notice the tapestries before? And if she did, why is she just now coming back? Would she really do this with a team of just Fluttershy? There's a level of acceptable contrivance in a show like this for getting all the characters in one place, but this just seems like such a stupid and hackneyed reason for them to happen to be at the castle on the same day as everyone else. Number 4, Spike spends the entire episode scared out of his mind, and Twilight never notices or acknowledges it, and just seems to brush it aside as inconsequential. Isn't she completely missing the lesson of her own previous episode, Lesson 0, which was all about not dismissing the worries of your friends just because those worries seem silly to you? Number 5, the dialogue is cyclical and repetitive as fuck. Every time Rarity said ungrateful or restoration and AJ or RD said daring or scared, I found myself wishing it was over with. Number 6, what was the point of Fluttershy hurting her wing? It feels like the animators didn't catch on that the point was for Fluttershy to not be able to fly out of the hole, and then they put a lid on it. This is really a nitpick though. Number 7, how in the name of fuck is the Journal of the Two Sisters going to help you find the answer to the chest puzzle? Celestia already told you that she didn't know jack shit about the chest, so her journal is completely useless. Not to mention, Twilight shows a complete lack of concern for the privacy of the still living royal sisters, which seems a little odd coming from someone who holds them in such high regard. Number 8, literally the instant I saw the pony at the organ, I knew it was going to be Pinkie. I actually expected to find out that the organ somehow was the school bell, but it turned out the school bell thing was just a really blatant misdirect. It's kind of hard not to assume that the one main character who isn't already in the castle yet is in the episode is the one playing the organ. Number 9, this lesson about letting your imagination get the best of you doesn't resonate at all. Twilight self-congratulatorily tells everyone how she's glad to have helped them get over their fears when all she really did was be inconsiderate of Spike's feelings and happened to be right about the Pony of Shadows. Yes, it can be nice to have a level-headed person around, but it's not cool of her to essentially belittle her friends for being scared. Number 10, the lesson about how learning about the past helped Twilight deal with problems in the present is excellent, but it feels totally shoehorned into this episode. Twilight was reading that book for no good reason to begin with, other than that it was a convenient way to make her feel comfortable confronting the Pony of Shadows. This lesson could have been fleshed out over an entire episode and probably been much more interesting. My purpose in concocting these two lists is not in the name of comparing them. It doesn't really matter that there are more items in the first list, nor that my reasons in the second list are a lot deeper than the ones in the first. In truth, I could put together lists of this nature for any episode of the show, but it doesn't cut to the heart of the issue. Do I like the episode or not? It all comes down to examining the evidence and making decisions. I've loved episodes with totally contrived plots like Super Speedy Cider Squeezy 6000, or with questionable moral presentation like Too Many Pinkie Pies, or even with inconsistent characterization like Mystery on the Friendship Express. In each of those episodes, the problems didn't bother me because I had decided I liked them for other reasons. What stuck out to me more than anything when I watched Castlemania was the repetitive and boring dialogue. I don't know why, but repetitive dialogue has always driven me insane in any show. The minute I start thinking, okay, I get it, is the minute I start losing interest, and this episode was full of that. As a result, this became the center of my focus. When I watched Tom's review of the episode, I completely understood why he enjoyed the things that he did about it, even though I hadn't given a second thought to many of those scenes on my own viewing, because I was too distracted by my annoyance of Rarity saying the word ungrateful again and again. In the end, though, I've gotta trust my gut. If I'd enjoyed the episode a little more, the list of things I can like might have been what my review looked like, and if I'd hated it a little more, it could have been the other list. Like I said before, I could pull a list like this over any episode of the show, but it takes something that really bothers me like Ghostbusters or Games Ponies Play to actually pull me into that kind of hateful mood. Breaking down every single fault in Castlemania would have been just as inauthentic to my actual reaction to the episode as focusing on the positives would have been. But maybe this is where the line between a review and an analysis, or even an analysis and a thorough analysis, analysis really lies. I didn't call my video a review because I felt I was doing more than just judging the quality of the episode, but at the same time, I didn't seek to accomplish much outside of identifying the source of my gut feelings. I left out the word thorough because I felt like I was missing something, what with so much praise flying around. Yet it was only when Cookie and I discussed our mutual dislike of the episode that I found myself breaking down the negatives to the extreme. If she had written my video, it would have looked a lot like list number 2, whereas Tom's looks a lot like list number 1. And I don't think for a second that he'd disagree with either of my lists on a conceptual level. What I want you to take away from this long and convoluted post is that opinions and impressions are not clear-cut and simple things. They have a life and can evolve and expand, and having an opinion means making a choice just as much as it means having a reaction. In my journey to perfect the idea of thoroughly analyzing, I think it's important that I identify the difference between thinking everything I can about an episode and thinking along the line that my gut leads me along, so that I can find the greatest variety of resonant answers in and outside of my basic feelings. And if that all makes sense to you, I hope you'll make similar considerations as you formulate opinions in the future. Am I becoming jaded? Is this why I can't have nice things? Or do I have nice things and I've gotten spoiled? I don't know. Daring Don't isn't a bad episode, I think. It's got a lot of fun things in it, but I feel like I'm stuck at the starting line, tripping over the episode's actual concept. Why is Daring Do real? I get the idea. It's someone Rainbow Dash looked up to, and she was learning a lesson about remembering that she's awesome and not holding other ponies on a pedestal. But why is Daring Do real? Rainbow Dash has real ponies that she looks up to, like Spitfire and the rest of the Wonderbolts. Why not make an episode about them? Or better yet, why not make an episode wherein Rainbow Dash's life parallels the story of the new Daring Do book, and she's not convinced that she can be as awesome as the character, but then comes through in the end? I just don't get why Daring Do had to be real. It's such a weird idea and introduces so many weird elements into the story. Like, I guess this means that all the stories have really been happening, but does that mean the world has been routinely in the hands of Lone Ranger Daring Do saving the day and no pony noticed, even though there must have been some real-life consequences which mirrored events of the books? Does Celestia know about this? Polsky says she probably does on Twitter, so has she just been letting Daring Do fight alone? Where's the whole power of harmony thing that's supposed to be going on? And why would Daring Do bother writing about her adventures on her binary typewriter? Is she just bragging? Why is she so determined to keep all this stuff secret and play it off as fiction when so much is at stake anyways? It's not like this is Indiana Jones where the magical artifacts are an unbelievable part of an otherwise real world. These adventures are taking place in Equestria where this shit would be an everyday occurrence. Are the books just her way of paying the bills in between saving the world? Also, the episode implies that she writes these stories as they're happening, yet somehow has established due dates. How does she know that her adventure should wrap up in 4 or even 6 months? The whole idea just seems so weird and out of left field to me that I can't stop thinking about it every time I watch the episode. Not to mention it throws a wrench in the comics canon that Twilight's mom was the one writing the books, but let's say I were to put the brakes on that for a bit and just accept it like the first 20 comments of this video are going to tell me to. I'm still left with a number of other questions. If Daring Do already has the final ring, why is there still supposed to be 6 months left in her adventure? She did mention not being sure how to get into the fortress, but how did that change in any way that made her add 2 months onto the release date? Back when Daring Do was a story within a story, it could be as contrived as it needed to be because that was kind of the joke. It was a parody of old pulp stories which were more about the crazy and drama of what was happening than about making sense. But once it's dragged into the reality of the MLP world, which, in spite of being a cartoon horse world, typically operates under some vestige of logic, it kinda starts feeling really fucking weird. But you know what? Maybe I'm really being harsh. Maybe something broke me. I did spend the entire time between seasons watching hardcore film analysis. Am I just harsher now as a person, or harsher because I've been scrutinizing this show down to the bones? I don't think so. That's the kind of stuff I get accused of whenever I'm a little harsh on something, but I'd like to think that the episodes I really love of this show were legitimately solid and appealing to me, and that they hold up, and it's not me that's changed, but the show. The episode's concept isn't all that bothered me. When Caballeron was going in and out of Yearling's house, did he really not notice the 6 ponies standing outside? How far away did Caballeron's gang get by the time Fluttershy reminded everyone that this was the thing that was happening and they should help? It didn't seem like very long, so out of the 6 of them, someone could have probably gone after Caballero while the others tended to Daring Do. Maybe let Applejack do it so she doesn't just stand around for the entire episode after her like 3 lines in the first half. Rarity can come too, she's not doing anything. Speaking of a group of 6 ponies, couldn't Daring Do have been like, well damn, I've got a personal army now, and one of you's an Alicorn princess? Shit, this won't even be hard. But I guess she works alone though. Rainbow Dash probably could have told Daring Do something like, I'm the fastest flyer in Equestria and one of the best athletes. I have a team of battle-ready friends who've saved Equestria at least like 8 times. But I guess she was nervous and stuff, which is understandable, but I don't get how she just forgot how to like do anything. When Daring Do was getting attacked, I thought for sure Rainbow Dash was gonna speed in and just own all those stupid tigers, but instead she gets caught by Aoizotl. But again, I can accept that she was caught up in how cool Daring Do is and wasn't really thinking about her own strengths. As a matter of fact, I actually really like the lesson in this episode. It's something I can relate to from both sides of the coin as someone who's been put on an undeserved pedestal by other people who don't appreciate their own talent, and as someone who puts others on a pedestal for their talent as if I haven't got any of my own. I think most people can kind of relate to this, especially if you do anything artistic and have people that you look up to, and find yourself turning into a statue when you try and talk to them. I think it makes sense that the only context wherein Rainbow Dash would actually humble herself would be in the presence of someone that she holds in higher regard. My favorite line in the episode is when Twilight says, "We wouldn't be who we are if we didn't go after her." It's a great wake-up line for Dash to remember that she's a part of something bigger than herself, being the element of loyalty. It's sort of like saying, Dash, this isn't really about you, it's about the pony who needs our help, no matter who they might be. But even then, it's kind of a weird way of framing the issue, because ultimately this isn't about Daring Do nor the main 6. Helping Daring Do is important, but more importantly, if Do were to fail, the entire valley would be fucked. I think there was a lot of room here for Daring Do herself to learn a lesson about being a part of something bigger than herself. The episode never really chastises Do for rejecting others' help, and it's kind of implied that she'll continue to go on these adventures alone in the future. Another thing I did enjoy about this episode is the portrayal of Rainbow Dash and Twilight Sparkle as members of a fandom. Anyone in the Brony fandom can surely relate to Rainbow Dash's desperation for more content, especially after this year's summer drought. My favorite thing about them is the sort of fandom dissonance between the two, as people who experience the work in different ways. Twilight is the kind of fan whose knowledge of the work is totally comprehensive, but she also is better able to handle the time between releases because she's a fan of other works as well. Meanwhile, Rainbow Dash doesn't have as much general knowledge of the franchise, but is more intensely invested because it's the only fandom that she belongs to. In this equation, I relate best to Twilight. I have a ridiculous comprehensive knowledge of Pony, but I handle the breaks in the show pretty well because I'm also a member of like every other fandom in existence and can keep myself occupied. Like Twilight, I think I do well being a huge fanboy of the creators of the work while also being able to treat them as normal people. I also love this conversation between Twilight and Rainbow Dash wherein they basically act out the comment section of one of my videos. Winding down here, I just want to reiterate that I don't think this is an all bad episode or even really dislike it in a big way. I enjoyed it more than Castlemania, which was a total flatline for me, whereas this episode had some cool concepts and a number of legit laugh out loud moments. I've always found Polsky to be one of the funniest writers on the show once I can get past how perplexing each of his episodes seems to be at first. According to his Twitter Q&A today, little of what he wrote of Spike at Your Service actually made it into the final episode, which probably means that he wrote the original version wherein Spike was Rarity's helper. He also clarified after my question that the ending of Games Ponies Play made no sense due to some kind of mix-up which they didn't have time to fix. I'm glad to hear that because I like the other Dave Polsky episodes. They're weird and messy and altogether different, but in a way that's usually interesting to look at. I can't say Daring Don't is a good episode or that I liked it, but it's definitely got that Polsky factor of making me stop to scratch my head and think about it a little harder, for better or for worse.
That was a mess!
Wait, hold on now. Gotta stay cool and collected.
To give a calm, clear analysis. Wait, this was a new writer? That's...
Stop. Professionalism, Tom. Keep these emotions in check.
Overall, it was kinda, sorta...
It was fucking awesome!
I know, right?
Miss Harshwini's amazing facial expressions totally make up for Games Ponies Play.
First song in season 4, and it's a great one!
I love it.
You see, this is an episode. This is a fucking episode! You thought we were only gonna harp about the negative shit in season 4? Fuck no! This episode makes my dick rock hard!
You remember my opinions video? What I can like about this episode, what I can hate? Fucking please. This is
why Flight to the Finish is the best fucking episode of Season 4.
Number 1! Rainbow Dash!
Remind me to do a video sometime about why Rainbow Dash is one of the best written characters in TV history, because I'm starting to believe it. Rainbow is in coaching mode again, and trying her hardest not to reach a hyperbolic event horizon over it. Her little side plot of trying to stay calm and professional to keep out of trouble with Harshwinnie is hilarious, a great use of her character, and has a big payoff at the end. But what makes her special in this episode is of course the way she handles the Cutie Mark Crusaders on the train. She scolds Applebloom and Sweetie Belle bluntly but appropriately, and then personally goes back to get Scootaloo. If this was Applejack or Rarity, they would have sent the remaining CMC to go back and apologize and bring Scoots themselves, but Rainbow Dash shows Scootaloo a whole new level of her importance through the gravitas of teaching her a lesson herself. Rainbow Dash comes in with utter confidence and tells it like it is. It doesn't matter that you can't fly. That was me. You're you. She says it as if the thought of trying to be her instead of trying to be yourself is completely daft, and puts aside Scootaloo's anxieties with gale force. She isn't patronizing or looking down on her as a child, but speaks to her as an equal with part disappointment and more parts concern over her very real investment in the quality of the play on an emotional level. It's Rainbow Dash being mature, teaching a valuable lesson, and most importantly, staying completely in character while doing it. It's good. It's good!
Number 2! Scootaloo! This little filly is killing it. She may have only 2 episodes under her belt, but both of them have proven to be fantastic. And both from, at the time, new writers. Is Scootaloo like DHX's proving ground for the new staff or something? Flight to the Finish finally addresses the elephant in the room that's been lingering for the last 3 seasons and change. Scootaloo not being able to fly. The fact that Scoots takes the prodding from Diamond and Spoon so hard just goes to show that being earthbound is a soft spot for her, as one would expect. The funny thing is, though, that until this episode, the show never really commented on this. Even at the end of Sleepless in Ponyville, when Dash takes Scoots flying, there's nothing to suggest that Scootaloo was upset at the fact that she couldn't be flying side by side with Dash. This whole aspect of her carrying emotional baggage from lacking the ability to fly was purely a fanon perception until this episode, but here it's finally put on display in full force. Scootaloo doesn't know how to fly, and it's abnormal for a filly her age. And by the end of the episode, with Dash's subtle redirect, it seems pretty clear that she never will either. She is bothered by this fact, and when it's brought back to the forefront of her mind by Diamond and Silver, she becomes caught up in her own insecurities and how her perceived weakness will negatively impact her friend's chances of winning the competition, and becomes obsessively fixated on remedying the matter, to the point where her obsession ends up doing more harm than simply shrugging off the words of her antagonizers.
Just like in Sleepless in Ponyville, Scootaloo is stubborn and grapples with her own inauthenticity. While her struggle in that episode was silent, this time the other Cutie Mark Crusaders know of it, and their response is, well, annoyed. They pretty much tell Scootaloo to get over herself at one point, which is fascinating. It shows that even though Scootaloo is facing the main emotional conflict in this episode, the repercussions it has on others is also important. Scoots' obsession over her inability to fly doesn't just hurt herself, but those close to her as well.
The fact that Scootaloo poorly hides this insecurity under the air of false bravado again reinforces her idolization of Rainbow Dash, as this is exactly how Dash would, and has, dealt with this kind of problem herself. Another behavioral parallel sprouts up when Scootaloo eventually decides that, when faced with a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, to simply go to the extreme and sever ties with the source of her problem completely, as opposed to simply attempting to work something out. Scootaloo ditches her friends at the train station in this episode, and in Wonderbolt Academy, Rainbow handles her issues with Spitfire in essentially the same way, choosing to bail when things seem hopeless. Number 3! Diamond Tiara?
Diamond Tiara is a fucking bitch. Like, oh my god, this girl is evil. She literally schemes on how to make the Cutie Mark Crusaders feel miserable and insecure, and decides to achieve this by making massively ableist remarks at Scootaloo and shaming her over things she can't help. This is like the shit they teach you in Bullying 101 at the University of Total Assholes. By the way, Silver Spoon's remark, "But we already called them blank flanks," was the best joke of the season so far. It reminded me of something out of Friendship is Witchcraft.
Number 4! Theming! Scootaloo's revelation in this episode is exactly the kind of progression that the Cutie Mark Crusaders as a whole represent thematically, and are long overdue for. It's a moral all about self-identity. Scootaloo feels that, by not being able to fly, she is disconnected from the defining characteristic of her tribe, and as such, is worth less because of it. The fact that she idolizes Rainbow Dash, a superstar athlete and arguably the best performance flyer this side of the Wonderbolts, only goes to further intensify her already deeply rooted obsession with flight, and the fact that she's acting like Rainbow Dash for the entirety of the episode just goes to further strengthen this point of the moral. A moral about not letting your race or your idols define you, but rather to define yourself. The fact that the trio isn't focusing on looking inwards and discovering their inherent selves is the reason they're stuck crusading in the first place. A lesson like this for Scootaloo that dials back her fangirling for Rainbow Dash a few levels and starts making her more of a fan of herself is a step in the right direction for eventually getting her cutie mark. Unlike trying to get a mark in flag carrying, which I'm guessing won't work.
Oh, but we aren't done here yet, folks. Let's talk about the repercussions the handling of Scootaloo's flightlessness has on the ethical mindset of this society. Let's think about this for a second. What does the climax of this story insinuate in terms of the mindset of all these characters? The show basically all but states that Scootaloo is handicapped, and how do the other characters respond?
They don't, and that's the beauty of it. Let's go back to that first scene with Diamond and Silver for a second. When they decide to call Scootaloo out for not being able to fly, how do Sweetie and Bloom react? Do they get uncomfortable? Do they try to make excuses? No, they shrug it off with casual indifference, all but calling the bullies bullshit as they see it. Even Rainbow Dash, a pony whose entire life goal centers around flight, recognizes that this isn't something to consider when it comes to Scootaloo. She sees her for who she is, not what her limitations are. This episode implies that everyone in Ponyville have been acutely aware that Scootaloo can't fly, and that it's uncommon for a filly her age for the entirety of the show's duration. And not once in a single episode has she ever been treated differently, looked down on with a sense of pity, or given preferential treatment. She was just another pony. And that's exactly how the situation should be handled in a land of magical ponies, or anywhere else. This is what we come to the show for. Characterization. Theming. Fuck!
Now, it's gonna rest on my conscience here if I don't mention anything wrong with this episode. The pacing in the first half is a little wonky with a lot of repetitive dialogue. The song, while nice, doesn't get anything done in the story, and the imagery throughout isn't terribly interesting. But, like, fucking I don't even care, this is just nitpicking.
So that's it. Just go on iTunes, buy the episode unless you're already stole it off YouTube. Fuck! Just go! Watch Fight to the Finish, alright? It was good!
I swear, it's fucking good. If this makes me that excited, if I can tear down fucking Castlemania, which people have been like, oh, it's a good episode, and I'm like, Flight to the Finish is the best episode of Season 4, then you better fucking whatever.
Riding on skis!
What stuck out to me in Power Ponies is how most of the superpowers the main six are portrayed with are things that they could already do. Rainbow Dash controls the weather, Twilight can use all kinds of crazy magic, Pinkie can travel at unusual speeds, Applejack can lasso anything, and Fluttershy becomes extra powerful when she's mad. Arguably, Rarity also is great at making things from her imagination, though in her case the power becomes a few magnitudes more literal. As a result of this, the narrative is really not so much about the main six gaining new powers as it is about emphasizing how much more useful all of them are compared to Spike already. It's meant to show you how the main six essentially are superheroes, and Spike doesn't really do much of anything. However, just like in Daring Don't, I feel like this would have been delivered better if it really had just been Spike drawing a parallel between the comic book and reality, just as Rainbow Dash did in Read It and Weep. It might have seemed like reusing a plotline, but we wouldn't have had the issue of this episode's setup taking so long. More than half of the episode is spent setting up and introducing concepts that are supposed to pay off in the remaining less than 10 minutes. We end up with a location, a villain, 6 superpowers, and magical objects that all feel critically underdeveloped and leave little lasting impact. Spike draws the parallel between himself and the comic pretty early on, so the middle section of the episode just feels like so much waiting around for him to get on with saving the day, and the situations that play out come across as stilted and rushed. The episode pays homage to a ton of comic book superheroes, so you can kinda have fun recognizing all the shoutouts, but if you're not that into comics, then it probably won't feel all that special. The one thing which did pay off big time was Flutter Hulk, and a big part of that was how they clearly paid homage not only to the idea of the Hulk, but to the way that the Hulk's arc is actually portrayed in the Avengers. It has the same build-up and contention from the Banner character over the lack of desire to actually transform. Plus, following through on having Fluttershy actually Hulk out was a big payoff. Other than that, I enjoyed seeing that Rarity's castle restoration project wasn't just a silly one-off joke in Castlemania, and I'm suspecting that this castle will continue to make important appearances across the season. I also thought it was clever how Maniac's hair allowed her to move in a way similar to Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man. The Pinkie Pie Cupcakes joke was funny, some of Rarity's projections were clever, and that's it. That's all I've got to say about it. It's a Spike episode. What did you expect? If you think I missed something important, let me know in the comments. From the beginning, let me clarify that I enjoyed the hell out of this episode. I really did. Having said that, I think this is the point where Season 4 has finally broken me. I feel like I'm on a crazy train that's left the rails, and I've just gotta buckle up and let the ride take me wherever it may go. I had this moment watching the episode, and let me know if you had it too, where I was like, oh man, this is a pretty good moral they're building up to. I wonder how they're gonna portray the resolution. And then suddenly, Fluttershy is a bat. Your argument is invalid. I mean, what do I say to that? It has nothing to do with the narrative or moral lesson of the episode, but Fluttershy turned into a fucking bat. Last week she was a Hulk and that was whatever, but now she's a wild bat pony and I just love it. I love the way she's animated, I love the idea that this is now a thing, and I hope to God that ending hint wasn't just some bullshit slap in the face. I can't rightly say that I'm about to thoroughly analyze this episode because I can't stop feeling like the whole thing is a farce. Even though Fluttershy is great in this episode in general, I don't think it worked as any kind of character study in the slightest. Even though I think the moral that they hinted at, which I'll dive into momentarily, was fantastic, I'm half questioning if it was even intentional since the episode goes completely off the deep end halfway through. Season 4 is difficult to analyze with any confidence because none of it seems to fucking matter. Besides Flight to the Finish, it's got lessons that are either absolute nonsense or poorly tied to the episode's storylines, characters that haven't done a damn thing new, I'm looking at you, so-called Alicorn Princess Twilight Sparkle, and every premise seems to be trying to one-up the last with how insane it can be without any narrative purpose. Quite honestly, I don't feel like I have it in me to thoroughly analyze episodes like Power Ponies and Bats, which are just meant to be fun, wacky sound and light shows without any real substance backing them. These episodes are way better suited to the comedic style of Silverquill and Drowning in Horseshoes, who can make entertaining videos out of this stuff while taking it as it is. Seriously, go and subscribe to both of those channels. If anyone deserves to be really the flag carriers of the My Little Pony analysis circuit for Season 4, it's probably those two. Check out Give and Take while you're at it, and Tom's Q&A videos are really great, though I think he's starting to feel similarly to myself at this point. I'm not saying that I'm done with MLP analysis, though I do plan to move into other media analysis on this channel in the very near future, i.e. now. I'm still going to write about every new episode that comes out, but this season just has me feeling washed up. There's plenty of other analysts saying a lot of what I have to say, but hey, maybe I'm overthinking it. I do actually have a lot to analyze about this episode. So the first half sets up for this great message about speciesism. It's actually a pretty fascinating topic to think about, just how much intelligent species tend to value themselves and their needs over those of less intelligent species, to the point of being ready to annihilate other species in the name of minor convenience. If you've ever swatted a bug, you should be able to relate to that sentiment, and actually taking the time to think about your cruelty can be a pretty eye-opening experience. During the song, we get this brilliant bit of symbolism as we see the different perspectives that Applejack and Fluttershy have on the vampire fruit bats. When we're in AJ vision, everything is dark and gloomy and the bats look like hideous monsters, but when we're in Fluttershy vision, everything is vibrant and nice and the bats are adorable. Fluttershy sees them for the good and AJ sees them for the bad, though Flutter's perspective seems at least a little bit more balanced. Fluttershy points out that the bats actually help to produce more productive apple trees in the long term, but Applejack won't listen, and that's where this episode loses track of whatever it was going for. The goal that it's setting up seems to be for Fluttershy to make Applejack realize that she's being short-sighted and too quick to demonize these creatures. However, she plays the trump card early on that the bats are actually a force of good, and AJ doesn't even listen. Now, people have been criticizing me in my negative reviews this season for projecting my expectations onto the episodes, and most of the time I've defended that I came up with my criticisms in retrospect. In this case though, the episode really did subvert my expectation, but I wouldn't be bringing it up if I thought it worked well. I really expected to find out something like the vampire bats were what caused AJ's giant apple to grow in the first place, or that they produced apples so alluring that ponies couldn't resist them. But in reality, Applejack never learns any reasons to keep the bats around other than what she already knew. They don't decide to make a bat sanctuary because they care about the bats more than they did before. They do it because they realize that getting rid of them is too much of a pain in the ass. What kind of a lesson is that? There's also this lesson about Fluttershy facing consequences for allowing her friends to pressure her into doing something that she knew was wrong, and this is an okay lesson, if not that thematically strong, but it brings to my attention the number one thing that pissed me off about this episode. Twilight Sparkle. Twilight. What the fuck are you doing? Was it wrong of me to expect that now that you're an Alicorn princess you'd be better at leadership roles? Or, you know, retain the lessons you've been learning across the entire show? What happened to bridal gossip? What happened to Swarm of the Century? Did you have to give up your brain to make room for your wings? Okay. I've gotta calm down. Trust me, I'm not joking. I love this episode. It's my favorite episode of season 4 so far, but I love this thing the same way I love Equestria Girls. It's dumb and silly, but I like it because it's a great sound and light show. I was super kind to that movie because I knew that everyone else was ragging on it already, and that Tom was working on his epic-length negative review of it. But I'm a lot more bitter over season 4. And no, I don't think it's me. I very much think it's the show. They're going for something different with this season. I can't be the only one noticing that 5 of the 7 episodes take place primarily at night, that 2 of them are horror themed, and that 2 of them are largely reliant on pop culture references, that there's this huge new focus on continuity and callbacks, and that every single episode has unnecessarily featured all of the main 6 doing next to nothing. Something is different this season. I don't want to try and place it, but I can't help feeling that the production staff have been allowed to go a little bit more wild as a result of their show appealing to a wider audience. Take that as you will. This episode boasts some of the best animation in the show, with detailed, unique backgrounds and the amazing job that they did on Flutterbat. It's got a fantastic song that pays tribute to Danny Elfman and the Nightmare Before Christmas soundtrack. It would be remiss of me to discount these factors because they really do matter to me. I've watched this episode 3 times now, and even though I think most of the dialogue is stupid and redundant as shit, I love the song and the Flutterbat scenes so much that I just walk away feeling happy every time. Fluttershy is really strong throughout the episode. I know that when I started on this channel, I was pretty harsh towards Fluttershy, but I loved her in Keep Calm and Flutter On. I thought Dr. Wolf's defense of her that kicked off his channel was brilliant. I adored her in Equestria Girls, and I thought she was strong in this episode even before the Flutterbat scene. I really think she's come into her own, and I enjoy her character a lot at this point. But even when I'm walking away with a smile, there's some stuff about this episode that just eats away at my mind. Okay, so Twilight makes the bats lose their taste for apples. What are they gonna eat now? Are they gonna starve to death? I assume that Twilight's spell transferred the bat aspect of Fluttershy either because she was nearby or because she was using the stare on the bats. But then the spell is able to be reversed without meeting the same conditions. Or did it do something different, hence the fang? Seriously, I'm gonna be so fucking pissed if that fang isn't a thing from now on. And can we talk about how fucking inane this plan is to make Fluttershy use the stare on herself? The episode clearly establishes that it's something she does through a conscious effort, yet she can somehow use it on herself accidentally by seeing herself in the mirror. She runs away from the first 2, but the third one stops her. It certainly doesn't look like she's using the stare. Is she just supposed to be in shock from seeing herself? If so, some dialogue to that effect would have been nice. I feel broken. Like I said, when I wrote about Equestria Girls, I was in a defensive position, but now I'm in an attacking position on an episode that I actually really like. I don't know how to feel about this. Like I said, I plan to keep covering this season, but I'm in a weird position where I honestly think that other people are more in tune with what the season is trying to do, and I'm some crazy old man raving about the good old days of season 3. Anyways, I'll be over here having an existential crisis till next week. In a way, the instinct to be generous towards others is inherently selfish, insofar as the desire to make the world a better place is also the desire to live in a better world. This episode is about the difference between treating others the way you wish to be treated and doing nice things for people with the expectation of compensation. It treads a very fine line to keep Rarity's friends from quite being wrong, yet keep Rarity totally forgivable under the circumstances. What fascinates me about Rarity is that they write her to be both amazingly generous and amazingly egotistical without painting the latter as a problem. And why should they? I may be speaking vainly as one of the most egotistical sons of bitches on planet Earth, but I've never understood how ego is a bad thing unless it clouds your ability of self-reflection. Rarity thinks she's amazing because she is amazing. She sings about setting the bar because she does set the bar and she wants people to follow her example. And they should. Rarity introduces Manehattan as a place with a fixation on karmic balance, although it's never really explained why this city in particular is like this. I think it's meant to suggest that in a city this big with this much going on, there's a constant possibility for good things to happen, and the more good things you put into the city, the more you'll get out of it. This sort of pay-it-forwardism works because when people have their problems taken care of, it leaves them more capable of taking care of the problems of others. The structure of this episode, interestingly enough, both introduces us to the concept of Manehattan's karmic mechanisms and shows us how they pay off, all within the first act. We see Rarity give generously and then receive generously, so it's established immediately that yes, generosity to others can often lead to generosity in return. When Rarity gets fucked over by her old acquaintance, it's easy to see coming that her outpouring of generosity is going to come back to save her at some point, and it's pretty obviously going to come from Coco Pamel. Far more interesting is the conflict which arises out of the pressure that this puts on Rarity. On the one hand, Rarity has done massively generous things for her friends throughout the episode, which she didn't have to do, and she brought them along for the primary purpose of supporting her at the competition the next morning. Twilight tells Rarity at the start of the episode that she should ask if there's anything they can do to help her. So when Rarity eventually does need to fall back on her friends for help, she's being pretty reasonable overall considering the circumstances leading up to it. In this scene, everyone fucks up a little, but in very human ways. Rarity's friends fuck up by making it too clear that they're disappointed, but their disappointment is perfectly reasonable. Likewise, Rarity fucks up by flipping her shit on them, but considering her frustration and everything she's done for them, it's hard to really blame her. But the bottom line is that the main six do, in fact, finish the dresses, yet Rarity, at least in the moment, does not forgive them. None of them actually had to do the work for her. At no point when Rarity was doing them all favors was it established that they would owe her one, so treating it like a transaction with a demand for compensation is a dirty tactic, and when they complied anyways, thankfulness should have been mutual. It's such a subtle level on which Rarity comes out more wrong than her friends. Like, all she had to do was treat them a little better and paint the situation in a gracious light instead of a commanding one, and it would have changed everything, but the way she puts it makes her seem like a dick. And this is the kind of difference that only the emotional, illogical part of our brains can make, yet it's an important and very real distinction nonetheless. In the end, all of the ponies are at least a little bit wrong, but none of them are worried about how the others are wrong. Rarity's friends don't seem to see themselves as wrong at all, but Rarity doesn't mind. Rarity asks for forgiveness, which has already been given. The conflict almost doesn't exist in reality, yet Applejack's outburst of honesty shows us how the effect was felt, even if forgiven, and Rarity's apology absolves any possibility of bad blood. If it sounds like I'm just basking in the details of this exchange, it's because I've had so many moments of this nature among my group of friends that seeing it play out so pitch perfectly here just leaves me in awe of how true to life it all is. The episode's finale has a significant standout moment wherein Rarity says that she's going to stay in Manehattan for a while. It doesn't follow through with the position going to Coco Pamel instead, but I thought it was an interesting placement of this idea that Rarity might leave, because deep inside we know that one day it's going to happen. The more clout she gains and collaborators she pulls, the closer she's going to get to being wrapped up in one of these cultural centers and have to leave Ponyville. There was a moment where I really thought we weren't going to see Rarity for a little while, and it had a sort of poignance that reminded me of the later episodes of K-On! Some random notes. I thought the Grumpy Cat cutie mark was random and dumb, but mostly because the symbol doesn't move with the guy's body, so it looks like it was just slapped on there at the last moment when someone realized that he had made a Grumpy Cat face. The "Wow, Applejack" line left me in stitches, but my favorite line in the episode is when Rarity screams, "Congratulations," which is a clear ponification of the phrase "Congratulations," and that makes me very happy. Also, Coco Pamel is adorable. Before I wrap up though, I've gotta end this on a bit of a low note. You're probably going to see this brought up in every review of the episode, but Twilight getting denied for a cab is kinda really fucking disturbing. It's bad enough that in any episode where her princesshood isn't explicitly mentioned, we never see her fly or do anything remotely princess-worthy, but the idea that even random pedestrians don't treat her like a princess is kinda daft. There's really no excuse here, cause you're not gonna tell me that no one around noticed a fucking alicorn asking for a ride. Even if they didn't know who she was, the wings and horn are a dead giveaway. I don't want to dwell on this too much since I already ranted about it in the last video, but this whole ignorance of Twilight's princesshood is starting to get really jarring and obnoxious. I'm pretty sure that even little kids can tell that a princess shouldn't be getting denied a cab ride, and they'd call bullshit. Anyways, besides that point, which has more to do with the episode's place in the overall narrative than it has to do with this episode, I thought Rarity Takes Manehattan was fantastic. It's dense, it's got 2 solid songs, lots of little things to think about, like how Applejack lifting this cart probably proves the idea that Earth ponies are exponentially stronger than the others, several memorable new characters, and a strong ethical backdrop for the dialogue. It's definitely my favorite episode of the season so far, probably my favorite Dave Polsky episode to date, and possibly one of my favorites in the entire show. A popular theory has been floating around that Golden Delicious is actually proof that Pinkie Pie really is an Apple family member. Notice that she takes a book from the bottom of the stack the same way Pinkie does with a scroll at the start of the episode. Golden Delicious also has a similarly curly mane to Pinkie and generally seems like a reasonable vision of how Pinkie's going to live when she's older, obsessed with chronicling the history of her family and munching on weak old gingerbread houses. Did anyone else notice that when Apple Bloom sings about the map, it's to the tune of Twilight Licious? She's probably about to say, "I'm Applelicious," before she gets cut off. When Big Mac said, "I was the pony," and got cut off, I felt like he was going to say, "I was the pony of shadows," or some other startling revelation. Did you know Big Mac's voice also played Golden Delicious? No, that's variety. Continuing the trend of half-finished thoughts, we also get an idea that Big Mac was imparting some kind of high-level philosophy or spiritual message onto Pinkie. That guy's full of mysteries for sure. Applejack's line about how she tries to tone down her pride in her family so as not to make non-family members jealous was actually relatable for me. I do the same thing, cause my family is amazing. AJ also plays the banjo, which is pretty sweet. And that's about all I have to say about this one. It's a good episode, just not one with any hidden depth or meaning to be drawn out from analysis. It's fun and cute and very directly to the point. The song is fantastic, probably the catchiest one of the season for me. I did think the animation was janky across the episode in comparison to what other episodes have been like this season. Seriously, what the hell is Pinkie doing right here? But other than that, and some forced feeling dialogue here and there, I've got nothing to complain about. See you next week. Alright, so the rainbow eyes are clearly a thing, which is going on with the keys. This is a pretty good episode. There's a lot of funny bits, but a lot of the dialogue is repetitive and redundant. 6 out of 10.
You got a spider bite, and maybe you told.
Okay, for real though, Rainbow Falls is another really weird episode for me, in that I kind of enjoy it harmlessly as is, but when I think about it, the concept just kind of baffles me. Not in the same way that Bats Are Daring Don't baffles me, but in a way that might be a bigger point of contention. Cookie Cutter totally disagreed with my assessments of the episode when I explained it to her, so maybe this will raise some interesting discussion. I think that Rainbow Dash was completely in the right for wanting to fly with the Wonderbolts, and Ponyville, Twilight in particular, was in the wrong for trying to stop her. I understand that Rainbow Dash is the element of loyalty, and that by her own words, she would never leave Ponyville hanging, but this seems to be a case of diminishing returns for Rainbow Dash, and I think it's about time that Ponyville stopped hanging on to Rainbow Dash and let her, spread her wings. The bottom line here is that even though they do an impressive job of just barely qualifying in this episode, the chances of Ponyville winning the relay race are next to none, and everyone seems to understand that. Twilight treats Rainbow Dash like she's a camp counselor doing something noble by letting two very special ponies compete out of their league, which is kind of insulting to them to begin with. Fluttershy and Bulk Biceps concede that Rainbow Dash can go to the other team towards the end, and seem more or less acutely aware that they shouldn't be here throughout the episode. The Equestria Games is an athletic competition that's obviously meant to parallel the Olympics. It's a place for the best of the best to assert their skills and emerge champion. It's not an elementary school baseball competition where every team gets a trophy for trying because it's really just about practicing for something further down the line. If Ponyville knew they didn't have a strong team with any likelihood to place in the competition, then why bother trying? Why hold back Rainbow Dash by attaching her to the relay team instead of putting her in an event that she was guaranteed to win? In fairness, we could say that Rainbow Dash competing with the weaker team means an even bigger challenge for her, and that if she carries this team to victory, it would assert her dominance as an equestrian flyer without question. This would create a classic wolf in sheep's clothing drama, where the overdog is painted as an underdog, making their victory that much more intense, which is actually a classic sports genre trope. Still though, while that could be fun to see in the long run, it's not something Rainbow Dash seems confident is going to happen, and she could literally take the gold anywhere else and make Ponyville proud without a contrived underdog narrative. More so than Rainbow Dash's placement though, what struck me as contrived was Fluttershy and Bulk Biceps being on the team in the first place. I understand that the other Ponyville Pegasi were doing other things, though I'm pretty sure there's a lot more than 6 Ponyville Pegasi in total, but maybe the others just weren't interested. Still though, isn't there an event better suited to Bulk Biceps' talent? Why isn't he deadlifting or something? Isn't that what his cutie mark is telling him? Fluttershy, meanwhile, isn't even an athlete. I feel like she just came along because she felt felt like someone had to do it. Maybe none of this would bother me if destiny wasn't such an explicit concern of ponies in Equestria, or if the Equestria Games weren't such a direct parallel to the Olympics. In the end, I can totally get behind Rainbow's reasoning for siding with Ponyville. The Wonderbolts were being dicks and bad team players, and they deserved to be called out on it, and I could see not wanting to be on a team of assholes, but I feel like the things which brought us to this conclusion were contrivances. As seems to be a trend in Season 4, a lot of the dialogue that bothered me in this episode came from Twilight Sparkle. I hope we're going to find out that Twilight is competing in some kind of magic event at the games, because I started to yell, "Why don't you fly the damn relay race?" when she kept taking an attitude with Rainbow Dash. She's gotta be a better flyer than Bulk Biceps by now. It's entirely possible that she can't compete as an alicorn or as a princess, which would be more than understandable, but I still don't like her attitude. When Rainbow Dash asked her, "What would you do?" my answer was, "Expect my friends to understand that this is my chance to live my dreams and that I kind of care about flying a lot more than these guys do." Seriously, you aren't going to tell me that this is something that BB and Flutters have been dreaming, they've been waiting for. One of them hates flying and the other has chosen a life of bulking. Why isn't this a lesson about sticking to your guns or something? Particularly obnoxious to me was Twilight's argument for why Rainbow Dash shouldn't switch teams, which is basically that all of her friends' efforts will be for nothing. First of all, it plays into the sunk cost fallacy, which is a whole other hang-up of mine that I recommend reading up on yourself. Secondly, these friends have only engaged this on a minor level, and it's not as though the entire possibility of Ponyville winning any events rests on Rainbow Dash. There's a ton of competitors and a ton of fields who could be competing in the games, and the main six could be cheering for them. The Ponyville cheer team seems pretty half-assed in comparison to the Wonderbolts team anyways. I feel like the episode is making out Ponyville to be a humble little town that we're supposed to feel sorry for because they're underdogs, but the reality is that the Cloudsdale team is better prepared, equipped, and just generally care more. If Ponyville gave as much of a shit as Cloudsdale did, they'd be regimenting themselves the same way. This isn't really a question of one team being more privileged than the other like it seems, it's a question of one team being more legit. The Wonderbolts are flyers because that's their passion and destiny. This isn't a story about a small town that wishes they could be the best flyers but they don't have the money to afford the kind of training that would make them great, which is another popular sports narrative. It's a story of a town that threw their hat in even though they didn't have enough players that actually gave a shit. Despite the contrived failure of a narrative though, this is one of those cases where I found things to enjoy about the episode just because Pony is so good at being naturally likable. I adored Fleetfoot, who was needlessly evil and sounded like she chain-smoked cigars between shots of whiskey all day, and Soren and Spitfire are always fun to see. I love that this continues and expands on Rainbow Dash's arc, though if I was being cynical, I could call it a blatant and far worse retread of Wonderbolt Academy. Seeing Derpy again was a really pleasant surprise, and I love that she gets such a triumphant entrance. At the end of the episode, I thought it was neat how the crowd, including Soren, are cheering for Ponyville, which once again plays into underdog sports tropes, but in this case it kind of works because Rainbow Dash really did show up the Wonderbolts as an Ekine being, and no matter how you slice it, she's still the most impressive athlete in Equestria. I love the idea that the Wonderbolts are steadily becoming fans of her instead of the other way around. I also thought Applejack and Pinkie Pie were hilarious in this episode, and for once I didn't begrudge forcing all of the main six into an episode, though Rarity was just kinda there. The grand narrative that seems to be emerging this season is that the elements of friendship are ultimately the most important things that there are. I think what they're going for in the long run is to show how even though the ponies have ambitions which ostensibly could have driven them away from one another, they'll eventually come to realize that they can live their dreams without leaving their friends behind. This could be a pretty cool theme, especially if we see Rainbow Dash and Rarity gradually become disillusioned with their old ideas about their futures and realize that they're already happy doing what they're doing. It would just need to be handled believably and not made too hokey. I'm interested to see where this whole thread leads. Hey every pony, Digibrony here. We're gonna do something a little bit different for this week's episode because frankly I think I need to do a long form unscripted ramble about this episode. The reason I want to use this format is that there's a lot of nuance to what I want to say about this episode that I don't think is going to come through if I write a script. A number of the reviews that I've been writing this season I felt have been kind of misinterpreted, or I'm not getting my point across well, so I think I need to try to go at it at a little bit more length, try to exactly get across what I mean. So hopefully it works. I'm going to go through the episode with my little notebook where I take my notes on the episode while I'm watching it the second time. And we're going to see what I thought of this episode, this season, try to get some kind of understanding going. The first thing I want to clarify is that there's never been an episode of My Little Pony that I thought was so bad that no one should watch it. That's never been the case. I love this show. I think this show, on the most basic level, is always good. If I had to put it to my scale, which I have a rating scale that goes from plus, 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 plus. Those are for things I like. Plus is like, double plus is love, triple plus is favorite. Then there's the negative version. Minus, 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 minus. Minus is eh. Minus, minus is and minus, minus, minus is ah. So, there's never been an episode of My Little Pony that I would put below 1 minus. It just doesn't happen. 1 minus would be, oh man, this is one of the episodes of the show that I don't really feel like watching when I rewatch the show. Doesn't mean nobody should watch it. Doesn't mean it's not good. Just means I'm like, this isn't really my thing. Three's a Crowd falls into the minus area. So does a number of the episodes in Season 4, actually. But that's not a big deal. And none of it's a big deal. None of it matters that much. The episodes that I don't like, it's not a big deal. And I think that in my attempt at making you understand why I felt negatively about certain episodes, I've also made you think that I felt more negatively than I actually did. That's the issue here. Because in the drama of saying something like Season 4 has finally broken me, it makes it sound like I've been laying awake at night, every night, like, losing my shit over like Season 4 and how it's ruining my life or something. It's really not the case. It's not that big a deal that it's not as good. And it's true, I don't like Season 4 as much as the other seasons. It's been, for me, like, it's been weird. I've not felt that it lived up to the standards that I appreciated from the show. But that doesn't mean that I hate it or that I'm sitting there going, oh, fuck Season 4. No, like, it's fine. It's whatever. There's been this perception where people are saying like, your videos have been depressing me because your dislike of the show is so strong and stuff like that. Which is odd because my videos aren't meant to be depressed or depressing. Like Rainbow Falls, I loved writing that video because even though it's a review that mostly talks about what the episode did wrong, for me it was, oh, I get to write an interesting, in-depth analysis. You know, this is something I get to look at on a deeper level, and that's cool to me. Even if it means that I don't like the episode or that I'm saying that the episode did something wrong, that doesn't mean it wasn't fun to look at and analyze. So, Rainbow Falls, when I watch the episode, there's parts of it I love. I talk about it in the video. I even say, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a fine episode despite all my problems with it. I enjoyed watching it. I love Fleetfoot. I love Applejack. I love how Applejack... My favorite moment in the episode is at the end when they're doing the race and Applejack just takes a bite of her stupid thing and just looks all satisfied. It's hilarious. There's a lot to like about even the worst episodes of this show, I think. So when people tell me something like, oh, watching your videos is making me depressed and making me hate Season 4, and I can understand not like if my criticisms actually make you hate the episode more than I do, that's understandable, I guess. But it's, for me, it's just like fun to talk about the things I'm talking about, you know. If I liked the episodes, I'd be having fun going on about what makes them great. If I don't like the episode, I'm gonna have fun going on about why I don't like it. Probably my two favorite reviews to write this season were Bats and Rainbow Falls, because they were the ones that really like had this moral thing that was nagging at me, you know, where I had to say, oh man, this is really weird and doesn't really line up with what I would have done, you know, to explain this ethic to children or something. So yeah, it was interesting to talk about those two episodes. Now on the other hand, Three's a Crowd, not interesting at all. I honestly believe this is one of the worst episodes of the entire show. And I'm not alone. A lot of the people I've talked to have said either that they think this episode is absolutely horrible or that they think it's really dumb but entertaining, this or that. Personally, I thought it was awful in every way. Didn't even really enjoy any of it, except that maybe the song is alright, but it's not a song I could see myself listening to ever. And I've got a list of reasons right here. First of all, Pinkie Pie in this episode is the first time she's bothered me this season. Everyone else debates, every review video I've seen is like, is Pinkie in character? Is she out of character? I don't care about whether she's in character. In this episode, she's just obnoxious. Just outright, I don't get it. I don't get why, what was up with the furniture sale thing? She doesn't even go to it. What was up with the Discord distracts her with a balloon and it gets her out of the episode? Like, wow. She just, everything she said was a non sequitur and it wasn't funny, and it made her part in the episode stupid. Flash Sentry came off the train. That was cool. I hate that they got rid of him. Like, you know, it's Two Best Brothers Bitch About Ponies put it perfectly. If you're gonna put him in the show, you might as well use him. And I feel like that's what they did. I feel like Jason Thiessen was like, oh, they're coming from the Crystal Empire, let's throw in this guy and, like, you know, nod to this continuity of sorts. Remind you that Equestria Girls is canon, which I know a lot of you want to forget. I hate Cadence's walk cycle. Her walk cycle looks stupid. She lifts her hooves way too high. I don't get it. She looks weird. My biggest problem with this episode is that all of the dialogue is exposition all the time. Everything they say is in service of the plot. Watch the entire scene at the train station, both before Fluttershy leaves, after she leaves, and after Twilight leaves. It's like 3 different episode plot line like setups that all take forever. You've got this whole, like, the start of the episode is Fluttershy's like, I'm gonna go to this other place and that's where I'll be. And then they're sending her off and they're like, goodbye to that other place where you'll be. And she's like, okay, I'm going to this other place. And she goes off. And then Twilight's like, I've got plans with Cadence. Here are my plans with Cadence. Oh, I'm gonna go do my plans with Cadence. And then Discord shows up and he's like, I am sick. And Fluttershy has gone to do her thing. And Twilight is also doing this thing. And if you guys don't take care of me, I might interrupt Twilight doing her thing. Aha, I have stopped all of you from being the ones who can help me. So now I'm going to go interrupt Twilight and Cadence doing their thing. And Tommy Oliver put it best. This takes 10 minutes. This is 10 minutes before we've actually gotten to what the real plot of the episode is. Which is that Discord is sick. He's trying to fuck with Twilight and Cadence and ruin their good time. And that's like the conflict. And that occurs 10 minutes into the episode after this incredibly long amount of time setting stuff up. And most of that setup ends up being expository dialogue where, you know, Discord has to at great length reiterate that he is sick, why he can't be cured, why they can't help him, what he's going to do, you know, somehow makes Applejack and Rarity sick, even though he's not sick. I'm guessing it's just his usual Discord magic, but manages to get rid of all the 5 and then go to Twilight's. You know what episode I thought was going to happen and might have even been more interesting? I thought for sure the episode was going to be about them trying to distract Discord so Cadence and Twilight can have their peaceful day, and the rest of the 5 were going to be taking care of him. And then we would have seen how each of their individual personalities bounces off of Discord, and, you know, it would have been interesting. Or even if it had just been when Applejack and Rarity are the only ones left, I would have watched an episode about them trying to take care of Discord, and any of that sounds more interesting than what we actually get, which is him just fucking with Twilight and Cadence and them being princess about it. Everyone's reaction to Discord is exactly the same. There's no variety. Everyone hates him. Everyone is just like, oh, Discord, you're a dick. And that's all. You could translate all of the dialogue that any of the main 6 says to Discord as, Discord is a dick. He shows up, they're all antagonistic towards him, and then he goes off to Twilight and Cadence and they're antagonistic towards him. And then by the end of the episode, nothing has changed with their relationships towards him. Now, what I do think is interesting, and my favorite thing about this episode, is that Discord brings out the asshole in the main 6. He makes them look like kind of douchebags. Because, yeah, he has a good point with his whole thing with Twilight at the end, where he's like, you never hang out with me, you never call. You say we're friends, but I don't see the friendship. And, you know, that's a good point. And it really does make you think, yeah, Twilight, it's obvious Twilight doesn't care about him. You know, it's obvious that she's trying to save face, she's trying to be magnanimous, she's trying to say, oh no, Discord, I totally like you. And, you know, her feelings are cheap. All of the main 6, their friendship, except for Fluttershy maybe, their friendships with Discord are cheap and not legitimate. And that's something worth exploring. That's something worth calling out. I've seen situations where you sort of like fake friendship or, you know, begrudgingly keep someone around even though you don't really consider them a friend, but you kind of feel like, you know, there's some kind of obligation or something. I've done that to people and I feel like a dick for it, but honestly, that would have been much more interesting to explore. Either have them become actual friends with Discord or even just admit that they're not. By the way, just a random note, and that would be a good lesson for Twilight to learn when she like gets her thread or whatever, or her key would be for her to, like, you know, she's supposed to be Princess of Friendship, so, you know, actually being friends with Discord would be a pretty interesting way to sort of redeem herself. I can predict exactly which episodes each character is going to get their key in, because the first one was called Rarity Takes Manehattan, and the second one was called Rainbow Falls, both of which has the character's name in the episode and is about their element. The next episode has Pinkie's name in the episode and it's about her element of laughter. There's also an episode coming up, I saw a title called Twilight Time, probably going to be Twilight's key. Just saying, it seems likely that each episode that gives a character a key is going to have their name in it, so look out for that when you're trying to predict when the keys are going to come. These episodes are just evenly spaced out enough, the ones that I'm naming, that they're probably the case. So there's this convention, it's the Star Swirl the Bearded convention, I call it SwirlCon 2010. Twilight and Cadence go there, Twilight gets to cosplay, there's a bunch of cosplayers dressed as Star Swirl the Bearded. What I liked about this scene was that, like, it kind of makes Cadence like the hot nerd to Twilight's bookish, like, dork girl kind of character. They're basically Daphne and Velma, and I thought that was funny. It was just that sort of moment where you see them together at the convention, and Twilight's all dressed up and everything, and she's clearly like the hardcore devotee kind of fan, and Cadence is, you know, whether or not she's just as into it, she's like the normal looking person there. It's kind of like when you bring one of your friends who likes a show a lot to a convention, but they're like for instance, when I take my brother Victor, and he's this ludicrously handsome, like, normal looking guy who looks like he just wandered in off the street, and even though he loves the show, you know, he's with me and I'm in like a pink wig and a shirt that has my cutie mark on it, and he's just this normal looking guy. And that's how I felt about Twilight and Cadence. There's just a note here that says most boring ep ever. I think I've already basically commented on that, but this episode, there's parts where I just, like, started glazing over in my rewatch where I was like, I don't care. I don't care. But here comes the biggest thing that I want to talk about. Because even though I think it's cool how Discord brings out the asshole in the main six, the biggest problem I have with this episode is that Discord isn't the same character that he has been. And I'm not just saying that he's written inconsistently or anything, I'm saying that he doesn't have the same presence in the show that he's had up until this point. First of all, with the pop culture references. Now, pop culture references in general don't really bother me. I get that they're a nod to the older audience or whatever, and I love them in the comics, in the MLP comics. They're always hilarious, very well placed, usually in the background, but they make just enough, like, they usually work well with the story, and if you get it, you kind of nod like, I get that reference. And so there's been some references in Season 4, actually kind of a lot. There's been one entire episode built around referencing, you know, comic book characters and stuff. None of it really bothers me at all. I don't see why it would. I don't get why it's a problem. To me, it's not really distracting. It's just kind of like, oh, interesting. But in this episode, Discord makes a ton of pop culture references. Just off the top of my head, there's the Harry Potter one, but the one that caught my attention really was the Hunter S. Thompson reference, because there's one scene where Discord is dressed up like Hunter S. Thompson as he is in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and he's pointing at a map to Twilight. He doesn't actually say any lines from Fear and Loathing, he just kind of, I guess they thought it was appropriate for whatever reason. It really doesn't have anything to do with anything, he just kind of is dressed that way to have him dressed as Hunter S. Thompson. And I got this sense that, oh my god, they turned Discord into the genie from Aladdin, and he wasn't that before. Because in the first Discord episodes, The Return of Harmony, he makes a lot of things happen. He's the god of chaos. He creates this chaotic situation. You could compare it to Alice in Wonderland, but there's no direct references to Alice in Wonderland, right? The town is topsy-turvy, night and day are switching quick, there's soap on the roads, there's popcorn in the corn, there's chocolate rain in the skies, and all the animals are transforming. And it was completely unique. It was chaos, and it was imaginative. Even if it was just simple stuff that, that probably anyone could have come up with, it wasn't a reference to something else. It was just interesting chaos that he was creating. And there was a lot of really unique, funny, interesting moments. He picks up a chocolate milk and he sips the cup off instead of the drink. That was brilliant. And there was a lot of that brilliance. In the episode where Fluttershy reforms him, he lifts her house and is spinning it around while talking to her, and there's a whole scene where the house is spinning, and that was ingenious. There's the part where he pops his eyes out and rolls them around, and I think throws them into a golf hole or something. All of these things were just really imaginative, cool ways to use his powers. And he didn't really do a whole lot at the start of Season 4, but he didn't do any pop culture references. And in this episode, suddenly, he's making a bunch of references. There's like a Ricola reference and stuff, and he's doing it while singing a big, extravagant song. And that's when I thought that Discord making pop culture references, you could argue, makes sense, because he's an all-knowing sort of god, or something to that effect. He's got great amounts of power. He's just like the genie from Aladdin, where the excuse for the genie to make pop culture references was that he was a genie. He's been around forever. He's got powers beyond our comprehension, so he can do things that sort of break the rules of the movie. No one else in Aladdin ever made pop culture references. It was just Genie because he was a genie. And while there's logic to Discord doing the same thing, that was not the case until now. This was never Discord's character. He was never a guy who makes pop culture references. It just kind of happened. And to me, it was a transformation. It was not the same. And then what really bothered me also is that he doesn't have the presence he had before. In Return of Harmony, Discord's kind of scary. He's disturbing. He had this sense of being this ultimate bad guy. That's why he gets treated like that. Discord is the opposite of Harmony. He was the big bad villain, and he was memorable because no other villain lived up to that, Even though the other villains were great, Discord had this great sense of main bad guy. He was the biggest antagonist that the show had had. Most dangerous antagonist the show had had. And in the first 2 episodes he appeared in, he came off as dangerous and kind of scary. So then you have the episode where Fluttershy reforms him, and the whole time you've got this great sense of he has bigger plans. It's obvious. He's fucking with the main 6, but he does it in this way where he comes off as more in control than the main 6 do. They're all suspicious of him, rightly so, but he's just causing so much chaos, in Fluttershy's life, that you get this sense that he has some control, and he's somewhat scary. He shows up at the start of Season 4, and he sort of flirts with the idea that maybe he's not really reformed, that he has bigger plans. He's the one who sowed the seeds of disharmony into the earth thousands of years ago, or however long ago. And so you get this sense of, oh, Discord still has plans. Discord's still a little bit scary or a little bit menacing, and his screen presence still kind of makes you, he feels big. He feels larger than life in all the episodes he's been in. And then in this one, he just feels like nothing. Discord's not intimidating, he's not scary, he doesn't come off as witty or intelligent or having a grand design. He shows up and he clearly just wants to fuck with Ponies. Fluttershy's gone, I'm gonna fuck with Ponies. So, it's not even like anything important was happening. He literally goes out to do something as petty as to ruin Twilight and Cadence's day. That's it. He's like, you guys are trying to be friends? Well, I'm gonna shit all over that. Like, what kind of, I could see if this was something important. Like, if Cadence actually was there on business, and Twilight, they were making some kind of important arrangement to deal with their kingdoms, and Discord wanted to mess with them or something. but he literally just wants to ruin their day. He just wants to be obnoxious. He's being a prick. He's not being a scary villain. He's not being an interesting or dark character. He's just being an asshole, and it wasn't the same for me. It wasn't what I liked about him. There was no sense of like, you don't feel tricked at all at the start of the episode, because Discord's at that point where you don't trust him implicitly because he's not trustworthy. The show's established it. None of the main six trust him. It's sort of like if I walked up to you and said, if I walked up to you and you thought I was trying to fuck with you, and I said, no, I'm not, and then like I slapped you in the face when you turn your head and I go, haha, yes I was. That's what Discord's doing here. It's like this really childish, silly, dumb sort of, I don't get it. I don't get why he was doing this, and it just makes him seem like a petty jackass, not a god of chaos. And he doesn't even succeed at something as simple as messing up their day. So, bleh. I didn't think it made any sense that Cadence completely changes her tune at the end of the episode. She follows along with Twilight's plan to go to the Star Swirl of Bearded convention, and she seems to be having a great time. She keeps saying throughout the episode, like, oh, don't worry, we'll just comply with Discord briefly and we'll be able to get back to the con. Don't worry, we'll get right back to our relaxing evening. And at the end she's like, well, I didn't really want a relaxing evening. Why didn't you just say so? Why not be like, hey Twi, let's go do something fun together? And Twi would have been like, okay, fun, bonding, Hey Twi, my experience in the Crystal Empire is getting dull. Let's go do cool things. Oh, wow, actually, Twilight, Discord making us do stuff is actually fun. I'm actually enjoying myself, so you don't have to stress anymore. She knew she was stressing, so why not play along? Why not just admit up front the way she felt instead of pretending the whole episode that she really, really wants to go to the Star Swirl convention and just relax? It's like, lying now. Rainbow Dash speeds off at the start of the episode, and everyone's making the joke like, oh yeah, elemental loyalty, and it wouldn't even bother me if the last episode wasn't about how loyal Rainbow Dash is. Literally one episode ago, Rainbow Dash is like, I'm gonna abandon my dreams just so I can help out Ponyville, and then this episode she's like, not it. Way to go, Rainbow Dash, showing that element. All in all, I did not enjoy this episode. Not as much as Rainbow Falls, which I mostly bitch about, because there wasn't anything that made me laugh or made me go, ooh. The most interesting thing about the episode to me is just the idea that Discord brings out the secret asshole that is in the main six. He makes them look like questionably good friends because of the fact that they're lying to him about being his friend. And so far, it is continually shown that they don't actually care about him and they're just lying to his face. And even though it doesn't legitimately bother him, and that his real plan is just to mess with Twilight and Cadence, it still is interesting that he seems aware of it, and is kind of calling out Twilight at the end. And the only problem is it has no repercussion and it's not the actual lesson. So it doesn't actually help. It's an interesting thought, an interesting thing to think about, but there's no acting on it. There's no character development in this episode. We see a problem with the characters, but nothing is done about it. And none of the main six have any really interesting or funny dialogue in the episode. Discord to me was boring. I didn't think he was funny. The song was okay, but again, it was just whatever. I don't know. Not my favorite episode, but again, it's not that big a deal. I'm not like lamenting the downfall of season 4. It's just I didn't like the episode. Maybe I'll like tomorrow's episode. It's got Weird Al Yankovic. He's pretty cool. Who knows? Not tomorrow's, but next week's. You know what I mean. So anyway, I hope I cleared some things up. I hope I got really to the heart of the matter here, that you understand exactly my perspective about why I didn't like this episode. That's all. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought in the comments, or whatever response you want to have, or what you thought about the episode. Just as a note, this episode had a lot of background music. All of it is by the magnificent Cherax Destructor. A lot of it came from his Helpful Kappa EP, which is one of my favorite music releases of this month so far, so go check that out. If you like this video, consider supporting me via Patreon. because then I can make more. Speaking of which, big shout outs to AskStarrySkies.tumblr.com. Go check it out because they're a patron and that makes them cool. Have a nice day, everybody. I've always found Pinkie Pie to be the most interesting character in My Little Pony, and most of my favorite episodes center around her development. A Friend Indeed was the first episode I ever analyzed, and Too Many Pinkie Pies was the first one I made a video for, so getting another Pinkie episode this rich with things to think about was an exciting experience. This episode takes everything that My Little Pony does well and executes it perfectly, making it one of the best episodes of the show, and certainly the best of Season 4. I've talked on this channel before about how my favorite episodes of MLP tend to be the ones which are the most dense with things happening, and Pinkie's Pride is certainly up there. Dialogue and visual gags are a constant throughout the episode, and the animation quality has either reached a brand new height or at least is as good as it's ever been. A lot of the episode's small, memorable moments were talked about in the new Two Best Brothers Bitch About Ponies video, which I recommend along with their show because it's quickly becoming one of my own favorite ways to follow up each new episode each week. I've got a few small things to take note of myself though. Cheese Sandwich can apparently use Photoshop. Gotta love those gradients. I like that we're comparing Cheese's professionally designed banner against Pinkie Pie's hoof-drawn one because this is a sound parallel to the real-life conflict between letting a friend plan your party for free versus hiring a professional party planner. There's a nod to Over a Barrel at the start of the episode, which is great because there's been no mention of those buffalo since their initial appearance as far as I remember. I'm in the crowd that actually loved Over a Barrel, so the callback is welcome. The song which Pinkie and Cheese perform in their goof-off is an obvious nod to Weird Al's famous polkas, which are my and many others' favorite Weird Al tracks. For those who don't know, on each album he releases, Weird Al includes a 4-minute polka song in which he sings a bunch of the most popular songs to have come out in the time between his albums. They're almost like musical pop culture time capsules, which often bring out the catchy flavor of the songs even better than the originals. During the goof-off, one of the bridges in the song is one that actually appears in almost all of Weird Al's polkas, and at one point he even sings Pinkie's Smile song, calling back to the format of said polkas. If that wasn't noteworthy enough though, it's worth pointing out that Weird Al did not actually write any of the music or lyrics in this episode. It was all Daniel Ingram, with Amy Keating Rogers collaborating on some of the lyrics. That means Ingram basically created his own Weird Al polka for Weird Al himself to sing on, and I think that's pretty dope. I also love the build-up to the goof-off itself, wherein Pinkie and Cheese are having an old-school western standoff with a build in tension right before completely dispersing it as they break into song. There's also these, oh god, is that Skywatcher? Make-A-Wish was a fantastic pop song that I'd love to have a full version of to play on actual birthdays. I love how it sounds like the kind of song Weird Al would actually parody. Moving along to the plot of the episode, we need to talk about Pinkie Pie for a moment, because I think her character is a lot more open to interpretation than most. A lot of people have their own idea of what Pinkie's true character is, and like to make claims about whether or not she's in character on an episode-by-episode basis. I think the whole idea of determining something like this is massively biased, which is okay, but really needs to be identified as such. The fact of the matter is that Pinkie has been all over the place since the very beginning, and trying to suss out an exact character for her is almost an act of selective memory. My own interpretation of Pinkie Pie is that her psyche is fundamentally fractured, but not in a necessarily bad way. I'm fond of the way that in modern psychological practice there's a trend of moving away from the idea that any non-neurotypical person is necessarily disabled or abnormal. There's a movement to considering neurosis less as a disorder and more as a simply atypical but equally valid way of living, so long as the person is able to be happy and function in society in their own way. Pinkie Pie has always been the most relatable character in MLP for me because she interacts with the world in a similar manner to the way I do. At her core, Pinkie Pie is paranoid and depressed. When you peel back the layers of things that make her happy, she can easily lapse into episodes of not only depression, but even elements of paranoid schizophrenia when you go down deep enough. Pinkie might even be considered a manic depressive, spending most of her time in a manic high that can be undercut into a depressive low with little provocation. This mania might explain the way that she acts so erratically all the time, putting on almost different personas across different episodes. I don't think this is terribly far from reality either. I think we can all relate to acting very differently depending on our mood or the situation we're in. I know that characters in media are often expected to be consistent in their characterization, but I think it's more realistic and often more interesting to show how a character can act very differently under different circumstances. Now, I'm not paranoid schizophrenic nor manic depressive depressive myself, but I can tell you that what I see in Pinkie is, if nothing else, a certain fragility. Her empire of happiness is predicated not on a core ability to be happy, but on things which she's built to make her happy, such as friendships, roles in society, and things to be passionate about. If she loses these things, her happiness can evaporate, and she's a little bit paranoid that this can happen all the time. The first time we saw Pinkie's psychosis was back in Party of One, when she thought that she was losing her friends and completely bottomed out. In A Friend Indeed, we learned about how Pinkie combats darkness and loneliness through talking to her friends and making them smile, the one thing that makes her happy and makes her whole life worthwhile. When she feels that she's caused pain for her friends, such as in Too Many Pinkie Pies, we see how she will get depressed and frustrated with herself. All of these elements and all of these episodes culminate in Pinkie's pride. As the one pony whose passion and her element are one and the same, the examination of her element ends up being the actualization of her character as a whole. The episode starts by reminding us what Pinkie Pie is all about, and then introducing us to another character who is all about the same exact thing. At first, she's excited to have a comrade, but then she starts to wonder if Cheese Sandwich has actually rendered her obsolete, which sends her into a self-identity crisis. Every single creative person on Earth has had this experience at least once. It's that moment when someone else in your field is doing their job so much better that you wonder what the point is of you doing anything. The problem is that it's a false contest. Sure, every field of work is competitive, but there's also room in this world for more than one creative vision. It's why competition thrives in the first place, and in many cases competition isn't founded on quality so much as it is on individual taste. Rainbow Dash's phrasing is interesting because she doesn't necessarily imply that Pinkie's parties are any worse than Cheese's, only that they're different. She says that Pinkie's parties are fun and cute and all, but that this party is going to be epic. It's like the difference between going to fast food for a burger and going to a high-class restaurant for a steak. Many people will say that the steak is definitively better, but I think it's more true that the steak is simply a different thing. The price is not necessarily reflective of tasting better, it's just kind of a meal that happens to be more expensive. And I think that we can easily have just as much of a good time eating fast food. After all, some of my best memories take place in a McDonald's, and I can't think of any great memories I've had at a fancy restaurant, but that doesn't mean I don't like going to those restaurants every once in a while for a taste of something different. Rainbow Dash isn't really trying to insult Pinkie's parties, but what she means is that she's been to a million of them and she knows what to expect. As Pinkie puts it, Cheese makes a great headliner. I think if Cheese was the one throwing big extravagant parties every week, Rainbow Dash would have been saying, "You know, I love big parties as much as the next pony, but for my birthday-versary, I just want to have a small get-together with some close friends." Maybe I'm speaking as someone who would feel lost at Cheese's party and whose idea of a party is to invite the same 6 friends I always have at my house over, drink shitloads of booze and belt out rap lyrics, but to me, the validity of Pinkie's parties in the face of Cheese's is obvious, and I think it is to Rainbow Dash as well. Pinkie's ballad has a certain tragic irony when you rewatch the episode, as I've done twice so far. It appears to be a triumphant song about Pinkie Pie achieving actualization. The first half is her realization that she doesn't understand anything other than throwing parties, which is interesting because so far in the show we've never really seen a pony outright question the validity of their talent outside of what my cutie mark is telling me. Pinkie is the perfect pony to explore this concept with because she's the only pony whose job, if she even has one, isn't tied to her natural talent. Rarity finds rare things and makes dresses with them, which she sells. Applejack bucks apples. Rainbow Dash controls weather at top speeds. Twilight is a goddamn princess of magic and friendship. Fluttershy takes care of animals. But Pinkie Pie doesn't clearly have a job, other than being an apprentice baker. You could say that she bakes things to bring to her parties, but if her main thing is throwing parties in itself, there seems to be no indication that she gets paid for it in any capacity. With such a fuzzily defined career, it makes sense that Pinkie would be the one to stand back and ask, just what is my talent anyways? She then looks back on all the memorable parties that she's thrown before, which ends up being a great way to work callbacks into the structure of the episode. Pinkie realizes that yes, she is a party pony, and seemingly comes to a renewed understanding of her purpose, which is cleverly turned on its head in the preceding scenes. As it turns out, Pinkie remembers that even though throwing parties is her primary vehicle for generating the happiness of her friends, the ends are actually more important than the means. Her prideful desire to proclaim her self-worth ends up being her primary concern, rather than actually making Rainbow Dash happy, and she realizes that just because getting to throw the party would have made her more satisfied, doesn't mean it would do the same for Rainbow Dash. It's interesting to compare this against Rarity and Rainbow Dash, whose elements and their ambitions have a more contentious relationship. Both of them desire a life that would ultimately take them away from their friends, but seem to be coming to the realization that their friends friends may actually be more important to them than their ambitions. Meanwhile, Pinkie Pie's realization is more that her ambition is her friends and has less to do with herself. All along, she's known that her end goal is smiling friends, but in this episode she appreciates that she doesn't necessarily need to be a part of the equation, as she'd thought in A Friend Indeed and Too Many Pinkie Pies. For once, she realizes the value in taking a step back and letting her friends have fun on their own, or at least without relying on her. I love that Cheese Sandwich actually got his inspiration from Pinkie Pie in the first place. He could easily have been a one-time character that just acted as a foil to Pinkie, but instead he's more tied into her narrative, showing a significant connection between the two of them. He ends up feeling like more than just a device to generate the episode's narrative, which is helped as well by Weird Al's fantastically lively performance of the character. Pinkie's Pride is an episode that really took me back and reminded me why I've loved this show for the past 2 years. It's been almost exactly that long since I first marathoned the show, ending on Read It and Weep, which was the newest episode at the time. 2 weeks later, I was already diving headlong into the fandom, and when A Friend Indeed came out, it rocked my face off. It was the first time I got to be a part of a big internet reaction to how awesome the episode was, and it inspired me to think about Pinkie Pie on an analytical level and relate to her. That episode might even have been the moment that MLP became really important and significant to my life. When Season 3 started that November, I'd spent most of the summer more involved with video games than My Little Pony, but the premiere started to grab me all over again. I wrote about it at great length and then decided it was time to finally episodically blog the show. When I wrote about Too Many Pinkie Pies, I was so proud of my intricate reading of the episode that I wanted actual pony fans to see it. I just bought all this equipment to start making analytical YouTube videos about video games, so I used it to make one about ponies. 14 months later, I'll admit that I've gotten a bit jaded. Back in Season 2, I had the excitement of someone just discovering for the first time something that I could call my definitive favorite show of all time. In Season 3, I had the excitement of achieving the most success I'd ever had as a media blogger, and I was the most positive voice in the fandom while others were calling Season 3 the worst yet. Things have changed. Season 4 brought in a flurry of new and exciting analysis videos, as well as more than a few less exciting ones that I still had to watch. Other people were feeling the excitement and energy that I had back when I started, back before an episode that I didn't really want to talk about meant a pay cut for that month, before I was under constant scrutiny as some kind of fandom figurehead, back when I could read and respond to the majority of my comments and private messages and Skype messages before they all got out of control, before I'd ever been embroiled in fandom drama or seen daily threads on message boards about how awful I am, before anyone gave a shit whether or not I liked an episode, and before anyone ever used the word obnoxious to describe the fact that a few episodes had bothered me. Would I have been so hard on these episodes back when I started? Probably. Most of the episodes of Season 1 that I thought were lackluster, I've just never done videos about. On this channel, I've deliberately covered episodes that I felt I could analyze on a deeper level. Back in Season 3, I was critical of nearly half of the episodes, despite the perception that I've always been a stalwart defender of the show's utmost quality or something. Early on, some of the most fun I had with the show was ragging on episodes like Ghostbusters, and I used to talk with Misfortune Dogged about how unclean the show's morals tended to come out all the time. Hell, I thoroughly enjoyed writing my review of Rainbow Falls. What Pinkie's Pride reminded me of, more than anything, is a state of mind. It wasn't of a time when My Little Pony was a better show. It wasn't even a time when I was a better or worse analyst. It just reminded me of how excited I could get for a new episode of this show. Maybe it's because for the first time in January, I was actually in a really great mood and not stressed about anything. Maybe Pinkie's infectious energy is always the quickest way to brighten up my day. Whatever the case may be, Pinkie's Pride is one of my favorite episodes of My Little Pony, and I'm very glad it exists. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to blasting Weird Al polka mega mixes and playing old Kirby games.
There can only be one pony, and that pony is Rarity!
Aha! It's official. Rarity is best pony. We finally have a definitive answer, so all you lot can go fuck yourselves. Yeah, that's right, walk away. It's canon, bitch. Well, actually, she's the best pony to run the pony thingy. What's it called? The thing where she's in charge of the town to run the show. What's it for? Actually, why didn't Twilight win? She's the organized one, and she's a princess. Well, whatever. That's not what this episode is about. Pinkie here is acting all prideful, almost boastful. And then she does this head inflate gag, which isn't funny, and then later falls on her face. Again, not terribly humorous. Oh, you hear that? 'Tis yet again the cries of Flanderization. Music to my ears. Music that I hate. I know I said a lot of mean things to Spike last time, and really he didn't deserve it. Although that was the joke, guys, seriously. But what do you know? Spike this time around was actually good. He was the sarcastic straight man, which is my favourite interpretation of his character. He ain't got time for this shit. Having said that, he is still Spike, so I guess you can't have everything. Oh, and Derpy keeps making appearances. Guys, I know you know we like Derpy, but maybe reel it in just a bit. You keep putting her in the foreground like this and she'll lose part of her charm. Soon we'll be saying, oh, Derpy. Yeah, whatever. I don't want her to stop being exciting, you guys. But all that stuff is small potatoes. The real meat of this episode is interesting in that it's the first episode aside from Hearts and Who's Day to truly delve into the subject of
Racism!
What? No, it isn't. Also, how did you get in here?
Trenderhoof's whole thing is that he looks at people whom he sees as quaint or beneath him and seeks to lift them up as an art form, as if reclassifying their struggle as something artistic. He's essentially suggesting that these people are lower and that's what makes them interesting, marginalizing, if you will.
How does that equate to racism? Also, seriously, where did you come from? I don't see any doors. I don't see any welcome mats. I don't see any invitation. You know, I looked the windows, and there's no way you could have got in.
Trenderhoof says specifically that he's impressed by the work ethic of Earth Ponies. Never mind the suggestion that Earth Ponies automatically have it harder, but he's making a generalization about Earth Ponies altogether. He's saying that for an Earth Pony to be successful, they've really gotta bust their ass, whereas unicorns just have it easy. It's like if I walked up to someone who isn't white and told them how proud I was that their people are striving to achieve something better for themselves. I'd come off as a bigoted asshole, grouping everyone in my race in with myself and everyone in their race in with them.
I guess I can see that. Even though most unicorns are shown to be high class and all wealthy, there's nothing to say that Earth Ponies are all mud-dwelling peasantry. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon are examples of well-off Earth Ponies who don't do a damn spot of hard work.
Precisely. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that Trenderhoof has any bad intentions, and I don't think he's against or hateful towards Earth Ponies as a race, but he's definitely ignorant about them and treats them almost like a different species that the unicorn master race needs to elevate to their level. And this brings us to the problem with Rarity's act, which Applejack calls her out on.
In the best possible way.
Rarity appropriates the culture of a field-working Earth Pony for the sake of trying to catch the attention of Trenderhoof, because he's in love with Applejack. For this, I'd compare it to if there was a white girl that I loved who was in love with my black friend because she was attracted to his interest in hip-hop and his street accent, not because those things actually appealed to her as well, but because she saw them as something novel for being black culture. And then I tried to catch her attention by dressing in baggy jeans and yelling 2 Chainz lyrics all the time. I'm pretty sure that my black friend is going to get pissed off at me eventually. And if he pulled an Applejack, he'd probably show up at my house in pajama pants and an anime t-shirt and start spouting nonsense analytical points about My Little Pony until my brain cracked.
Well, humorous analogies aside, have you got any actual impression about the episode? Oh, exalted Digi-sama?
0 out of 10, worst episode ever.
What?
It's boring and I hate it.
But I thought you loved racism. Anyway, isn't your favorite pony Applejack? Look at how hot she is eating that apple all sexually. Actually a little weird. Whoa.
Don't get me wrong, Applejack can eat my apple any day, but I just wasn't seeing the appeal the way Trenderhoof was, I guess. I don't know, I was kinda like, ew, Applejack, go take a bath before you give me that look, nasty bitch.
Well, what about Rarity? Tabitha St. Germain really raised the bar for vocal squeakery this episode, you've gotta admit.
Her performance is impressive for sure, but I didn't really care about or find funny any of the stuff she was actually saying. Like, I giggled at the voice, but I was really just hoping this thing would wrap up. I can't stand that sort of incessant back and forth bickering, and I wanted to hurry up and get to the end since by this point everything had been horribly predictable.
I agree. Pretty much everything that happens in this episode is predictable, because it's a tired, cliched story. We've all heard it at least 1 billion times, but I don't believe that it being a cliched story makes it a worse story. It was clearly good the first time it was told, and if you can look beyond its unoriginality, you can still appreciate it as such. Besides, it's not really a plot that works better if you don't know what's going to happen.
I'm all fine and good with a plot that I can predict, but it needs to keep me entertained in the meantime. We all knew how Applebuck season was gonna end by the 5-minute mark, but the constant presence of dry, amazing humor made the entire episode a joy to watch. What's this one got going for it?
Well, for me, it was Tabitha's vocal performance for the most part. If that wasn't enough for you, then I suppose we may be at an impasse. Can you not enjoy it for something like that?
Nope.
Whoa. You really are a downer on Season 4.
Yep. I'm here to ruin it for everyone.
You dick. Unsubscribed. 0 out of 10. Get off the stage, you filthy unicorn hussy.
I'm gonna go analyze some random old episode now. Cheers.
And don't come back!
Ha! You throw like an earth pony.
Why, you...
By which I mean, ow! That hurt. Fuck you!
Wait. Why'd I just burn that bridge? That's an important bridge. Think of the subs.
Choke on a bag of baby dicks.
Digi! I didn't mean it!
1v1, I wreck you, nub, do you even live?
Dang it. Well, I guess I should conclude my thoughts. This episode was completely predictable and cliched. It's a premise we've seen enough of, and there were no twists or turns to try and break up the formula. Having said that, look at this fucking face, I mean, jeez, it's just the best! And the...
I can't believe he's coming!
and the...
He doesn't like me!
It just makes everything right. At least for me. What can I say? Ponies are cute. This show is cute. This show is very good at being cute. And sometimes that's just all you need.
Hey every pony, Digibrony here. You're probably wondering why I haven't put out a video for Filli Vanilli. It's because I'm out of town right now, for those who don't follow my Twitter or Tumblr, which, by the way, if you ever want to keep up to date and you're like, where the hell's Digibrony? Good way to do that is to follow my Twitter or Tumblr. I usually keep those pretty updated. I was going to do a little vlog video about the episode with my girlfriend because I'm at her house, cookie cutter, but the first time we recorded it was with this camera, and as you may notice right now it looks choppy, and it was really bad, so we kind of threw that one out, and then I recorded one on my nice camera, but for some reason my computer doesn't want to read my nice camera, so there's two versions of a video that are kind of out in the void, but I figured I might as well do something really short just to at least give my impressions of it, because I did like Filli Vanilli, and people have told me, well, if you like it, you should say so, because people want to hear you be positive about an episode. I did like Filli Vanilli. I think it has its fair share of issues. Honestly, go watch the new Two Best Brothers Bitch About Ponies video. They are currently, I'm just going to say, probably outright my favorite My Little Pony analysis channel. My favorite one that's doing it week by week. I love their videos. I watch their videos the way you guys watch my videos. A new episode comes out and I'm like, oh, I wonder what Two Best Brothers are going to say about it. So go check out the new Two Best Brothers Bitch About Ponies video. I probably have it linked in the description, is why I keep pointing down. I'm used to things being linked down there. They covered everything I would have to say about it. I would agree with Phantom Horn. I think it has problems, but it's still a fun episode, mostly because Fluttershy is adorable, and it helps that I watched it with Cookie Cutter, and she's a huge Fluttershy fan, so she was having a great time. She also wanted to show off her winter wrap-up Rarity custom plushie, so I figured I'd do that since she's not here. She's at work, by the way, if you're wondering why she's not in the frame. But yeah, that's her awesome, gigantic winter wrap-up Rarity. Anyway, yeah, so Filli Vanilli, good episode. Go watch Two Best Brothers bitch about it. It's supposedly a collab with me, even, although I had no idea it was happening, but it's there. So go check out their video. I feel like I had something else to say here, but I don't remember what. So have a nice day. And I may not be back for next week's episode either, or it'll be late at least. I will still be here, I think. Let me check real quick. Check my calendar. Yeah, I'm still going to be here till the 26th. So if I do put out a video for the next episode, it will be probably a good 5 or 6 days late. But it may happen. Depends on if I have stuff to say about it anyway. In any case, that's all. Bye, bye. As much as I love my parents and how I've come out, however that is, I can't deny that I've been coddled and protected too much in my life. I can hardly blame my parents, understanding both the circumstances of their own upbringings and their attitudes towards treating children, but I know that they've taken for granted some traits of their own behavior that they didn't realize must be instilled in a child for them to be inherited. Quiet doesn't come naturally to some ponies, and work ethic doesn't come naturally to others. When I was 18, my dad was perplexed by the fact that I had no strong desire to leave the house. I asked, why would I? Each of my parents came from terrible home situations that caused them to go out on their own at young ages. Meanwhile, I've got an incredible relationship with my entire family and a great living situation. What's the rush? Alas, the cost doesn't go one way. Sure, I don't lose anything by staying at home, but if I'm not paying a hot chunk of the rent and utilities, then I'm costing something to the household. My dad doesn't want to work forever and has his own ideas of what he'll be doing once my brothers are done with college that don't involve coddling adults. I respect that, and while I find the uniquely Western normalcy of leaving the house immediately upon adulthood strange, I certainly don't disagree that if I'm here I should be providing. Fluttershy's relationship with the Breezies is like that of a parent. She wants to have them with her and to take care of them, even as she knows that they must eventually grow up and get out on their own. The detriment they cause to her livelihood and functionality seem like a correct trade-off for the ability to make sure that they never get hurt, even if this is the opposite of creating functionality within them. Like most parents, Fluttershy has only vague ideas about what's right for her kids and does a lot of random guesswork in the process of figuring it out. The kids don't know what's good for them, but it's hard to ignore what they want. Even as adults, we struggle with trying to provide one another with what we think we need versus what we think we want. In communication, we rely on the maturity of others to vaguely understand what they're doing. It's a bold assumption to make, but we don't really have many choices. Without someone to point to and consider an objective truth haver, we're all as good as children navigating our world. Even the goals are all made up and oblique. Every once in a while, we get a moment of clarity where it seems like we really know what to do, but communication remains difficult. Fluttershy is assured that she has to assert herself for others to get the message. I've told off my fair share of people in the day, as often for my sake as for theirs. If I share a trait with Fluttershy, it's her dangerous level of magnanimity that always teeters into subtly abusive relationships and an eventual snap of tensions. It's not easy to go through this time and again without abandoning social interaction altogether, but Fluttershy has a big heart. Examining the ebb and flow of my Skype usage and the people I keep in contact, I suddenly have another level of appreciation for the cycle of Fluttershy's anxiety and distance. Seabreeze is a child who could have fallen through the cracks, but instead carries his generation to the next level of existence as a great leader. I would assume that he's been through a lot in his life. If the group of Breezies are his peers, all undergoing this coming-of-age ritual together, then it's telling how Seabreeze already has a child. Not to say that every person with a child is mature, but we can fairly hope that one achieves some level of level-headedness before they can handle a committed relationship and responsibility. Realizing that Seabreeze can't make his journey alone is sobering. It reminds me of the children who have a real drive to succeed, who are trapped in a system that will never know how to bring them up, and who far outnumber the lucky few that will make it out. I was once a child who had to explain to my mom what I wanted out of life and how I planned to get it through a system that she couldn't possibly comprehend, being as I was a part of its pioneering generation. Very few of us know ourselves and our circumstances well enough to know when our parents are lost, and fewer still are so obscenely lucky as to have parents with open ears. The journey of the Breezies is bittersweet. At once a triumph of Seabreeze's luck, Fluttershy's open-mindedness, and a generation's ability to come around, as well as a sobering reminder of how much our own world begs to function so beautifully. Hey y'all, what's up? I'm just chilling out here, having fun with my pals, having a happy old time. Nothing sad or depressing here, just enjoying some quality time with the Bills and Susans. That's my friends. 2 of them are named Bill and the other 2 are named Susan. It gets confusing. Huh? What's up with my eyes? Oh, nothing. I've been up all night is all. I spend most of my time staring at a computer screen. The cigarette helps wake me up. See? Everything's happy-go-funsies here. Let's talk about ponies. I wasn't going to cover Twilight Time because I was out of town when it came out and I didn't have much to say about it, but it actually fits in better with this new style of video. Nearly a year ago, at the tail end of Season 3, I released my most popular and memorable video, Observations on MLP Alicorn Princess Twilight Sparkle. It came just as my channel was starting to spike in popularity and played a big role in helping that spike to continue. It was a defense of a controversial episode meant to be a moment of catharsis for myself and everyone else who loved the end of Season 3. Jason Thiessen, Megan McCarthy, and M.A. Larson all watched the video and gave their approval, and it remains the most popular video on my channel with nearly 250,000 views. At the end of the video, I made the grandstanding statement that I was a fucking alicorn princess, which spawned tons of fan art, a t-shirt that no one bought, and the idea among my fans that I was the king of my craft. Since that time, 11 months ago, the relevance of Twilight Sparkle's princesshood has not really been felt again until this episode. As for me, I never really stepped up to the plate as promised. I thought it would be pretentious to actually go full alicorn with my OC, even though a lot of people wanted me to, and over time my leadership position grew weary and drove me away. You could say that now I'm taking the reins from a populace-approved leadership and making it my own strange dictatorship, but that would be pushing the metaphor a bit. Twilight Sparkle's persona in this episode reminded me a lot of situations I've been put into in the past year. Now, I know that most of you dear viewers are mature, perhaps adults who view me as an equal, just some guy who wrote some things you thought were kind of cool, or maybe even inspired you. But believe me when I say that there are a staggering contingent of people who view me in a way similar to how Diamond Tiara and her classmates view Twilight Sparkle. Not only as a figurehead of prominence and popularity, but one that, should they be made approachable, may be approached for whatever purpose they may like. Twilight Sparkle is helping the CMC for the fun of it. She's always glad to pass on her love of learning for learning's sake. Sub out the word learning for analysis and you're looking right at me. Trust me that I do love being able to help people to make better analysis and to contribute to the culture that I am so firmly invested in. Just as Twilight looks up to the likes of Starswirl the Bearded and Princess Celestia, I look up to the likes of Film Crit Hulk and Roger Ebert. As Twilight has her close friends whom she considers her equals, I have the likes of Tommy Oliver, Anthony C, and Drowning in Footwear, as well as people I don't know personally like Adam Johnston, Super Bunny Hop, Campster, and Ego Raptor. And like Twilight tries to pass on her passion to the Cutie Mark Crusaders, I have provided guidance to no shortage of young voices over the years, even before I was involved with Pony. I remember, for instance, a kid called Ultra Eternal Blackout who routinely asked me to tutor him as an anime blogger, and who always said how he shared my intense passion for the craft, yet suddenly disappeared at one point. After a while, so many people asked me how I do my videos that I started asking them why they wanted to do analysis videos to begin with. Some thought it was just easy, or just a thing they felt they could do, and even a few literally told me that they were in it hoping for popularity like what I had. So I made a video called Guide to Doing Analysis that mostly concerns itself with reaffirming the listener's passion. There's nothing wrong with being the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Their relationship with Twilight is just the perfect amount of guidance like what I enjoy doing. I love to help a few people get better as much as like once a week, like Twilight time. If anything I teach sticks, it will be great, and there's no rush to become good. I'm honestly surprised that no analysis videos I watched of this episode pointed out how the CMC are not in as much of a rush to get good for once. Every time we've ever seen them, they want to be perfect at their craft immediately, but now they seem far more capable of taking their time and getting it right. They're growing up, which is good because their voice actresses are certainly starting to sound too old to play kindergartners anymore. I said once in the past that to me, the ideal trajectory of this series would be if after season 4 or 5, the Cutie Mark Crusaders, including Babs and the 2 confirmed Crusaders in Manehattan, become the main characters, with the main 6 taking on a supporting role. Sweetie Belle can become Twilight's apprentice, Apple Bloom can become the same to Zakura, and Scootaloo will retain the mentorship of Rainbow Dash. I'm not going to get my hopes up, but this episode does fill my head with possibilities. As an Alicorn celebrity, of course, there are more people vying for your attention than simply 3 possibly legitimate students. I tried for a long time to always provide advice when asked, but I am not exaggerating slightly that I started getting questions about how my videos are made on a daily basis. So I put together as many tutorial videos as I could for my sanity's sake and decided that anyone who wasn't at least inquisitive enough to look through my whole channel before asking me how I make my videos probably didn't deserve the advice. See, while guidance like what Twilight provides is healthy, it is obnoxious to approach anyone with a question half-heartedly. I am not interested in helping people who aren't especially passionate when I could be adding to the fire of a heart that really will make something of it. As someone who learned everything about how to make videos by watching countless videos and doing research and intuiting things, I expect at least some level of personal drive up front from those seeking advice. Twilight is okay with guiding a mass like a sort of teacher, but she says herself that this will take away from the quality of the lesson that the CMC will receive. If we take just a moment, we can realize how this is a huge, scathing remark towards the Western school system. Anyone who knows anything about education will tell you that bigger classrooms and impersonal teaching strategies are the biggest problems with our schools. Every individual has their own needs, which are completely whitewashed in favor of mass production of education. I'll link a cool video about this subject in the description. The thing is, we all know that most of these kids don't really give a shit. Twilight probably thinks this will be a fun distraction, but is well aware that before long, most of these kids will not be showing up for Twilight time. But outright dismissal wouldn't necessarily be healthy either, because there's always the odds that one kid will be inspired. When the mass withers away, maybe a newly impassioned soul will remain, ready to learn and create. That's exactly why it's so hard for me to turn people away. I see everyone as having potential. For a very long time, I did not deny anyone who added me on Skype, because there was always a chance that they might be someone I could become friends with. And while I've got a few hundred contacts now whom I've said no more than a few words to, and I've had a few contacts that had to be blocked for their actions, I nonetheless did make some friends, and I don't think I have any regrets about how I operated. But there is, without question, a saturation point, and it's one that I eventually hit. In fact, I hit it because there were too many actually cool people that I became friends with and wanted to keep in contact with. I met so many musicians and video makers and regular pony folk who all shared my passions and humor, and I didn't want to leave anybody out, but it just got to be too cumbersome. And the more people I involved myself with, the more distracting and dramatic elements came with it. Everything came to a head this January, around the time that I became embroiled in a heated controversy that I've now done as much as possible to put out of mind, i.e. don't ask, and I decided it was time to recluse. I disconnected with the internet and social sites, marked myself as invisible on Skype, and refocused on my center, analysis. If I was one of the guardians of childhood, that would be my center. And so, on disconnecting, I reignited my passion, reaffirmed a small circle of contacts, and with some sadness, allowed many relationships to fall by the wayside. But this ramble has gotten off the topic of the episode. Twilight realizes that these kids are only in it to become pony famous, and the ruse comes to an unceremonious end, though the CMC proved that their passion is existent, and Twilight time continues. The "prove it" line is one that I've literally said to people in the same position. It's funny how now is the moment I most resonate with Twilight Sparkle, even as I've deliberately evicted myself from the position of a community leader. But then again, I've always felt the best way to lead is by example, and what I'm representing here with this new art style and this new analytical style is exactly what I want to see from the world. What I love in analysis is the personal angle. What I love in art is sketchy lines and dark circles under the eyes. Not that I think everyone should rush out and copy my style, but what I mean is that everyone should copy my decision to do exactly what I want and am passionate about. Oh, and by the way, yes, it's a cigarette. I smoke about once a day. Is it a health risk? Maybe. I think I'm in way more danger from the 7 cans of Mountain Dew I drink daily. It so happens that I'm pretty well read on concerns of health, as many of my friends are health nuts, and the rule is really everything in moderation. And I do mean everything is fair game to me, and I do mean all of it should be done in moderation. A lot of chain smokers live into old age, like my grandmother, and there's not a high likelihood of getting lung disease from smoking once a day, but more importantly, you're not my mom, so kindly fuck off. Last time I checked, you don't like it when I criticize the things you do in your own goddamn time. I'm tired. Cigarettes wake me up. They give me energy that I need to get through the day. They're legal and I'm an adult, and if you tell me I'm being a bad role model, I'll remind you that I'm a 22-year-old who lives with his parents, is only awake at night, always forgets to brush his teeth, drinks only Mountain Dew, works an unsteady job making YouTube videos with no benefits, no college degree, minimal work experience, and the majority of the money that I actually spend is on fast food. I was never a good role model, and if you can't appreciate that you can learn something from someone who doesn't fit into your paradigm of the best manner of living, then I can't help you. Anyways, sorry about the cantankerous rant, most of you didn't deserve that. The majority of the reactions to this new video style have been overwhelmingly positive. I really wanted this series to reach people on a deeper level, and I can see that it's definitely done so for a lot of you. Many people complained that the atmosphere was depressing, and that's really not what I was going for. While relaxed, tired, and chilled out, my pony is not supposed to be depressed, so I thought maybe if I put in a bright and happy background it would gel better. Let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, if you enjoy this channel, consider supporting it through Patreon or through donations via PayPal. See ya on Sunday! One of my friends in high school needed permission to leave his house at 17 years old. He only came over to my house every few months, and only if my mom called his mom to confirm that it was okay. His mom wouldn't let him keep his job as a bagger at Farm Fresh and constantly demoralized him to the idea that he could do anything on his own. On his 18th birthday, he left the house without saying a word, signed up for the Marines, and stayed with friends up until it was time for him to leave for boot camp. Even now, after his time in the Marines is over, he doesn't have a good relationship with his mom. Overprotectiveness is dangerous in more ways than one. It won't only stunt a child's growth, but it will breed resentment, which is possibly even worse. It's difficult for a child to listen to anything an adult says when they don't feel that the adult respects them and their will. All the people I've known whose parents were overprotective have made a point to be as different from their parents as possible. On a less extreme level, I know that many families have little tests and definitive moments when a child comes of age and can be trusted with new things. Personally, my family never had rigidly defined rules. My brothers and I kind of implicitly understood our limits, and when we were ready to start doing things on our own, it just kind of happened. I never had my parents telling me that I was now big enough to be home alone. It was more like I said one day that I wanted to stay home alone, and my dad said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes," and then I stayed home alone. My ability to relate with this episode comes more from anecdotal understanding of other families, either through the stories of my friends or from watching so many other cartoons in my life that deal with the same kind of issues. If the goal of Friendship is Magic is to be a show that adults can watch with their children and not want to kill themselves, I don't know if this episode succeeded, since the ludicrously repetitive dialogue felt like drilling a hole through my skull, but I want to think that there are probably kids who will be okay with and maybe connect with the moral of this episode, if nothing else. Having said that, I wonder if the episode suggests to those kids that they should just disobey their parents and do risky things to prove that they're ready. While an unsafe message, I can't say I'd be at ends with that, even if I should be. Regardless of how a family structures the incremental increase of rights to their children, it's also true that readiness varies completely from person to person, and that there is no hardline bar for what readiness actually is. Many people become ready for something when it becomes necessary for them to be. When both of my parents were working and my brother and I were in middle school, our youngest brother was always going to have an hour at home alone after returning from elementary school. He was ready because he had to be. I finally got my driver's license at 19 when my mom's cancer went into remission and someone had to drive her between frequent doctor's appointments. I swallowed my fear immediately and took responsibility. Apple Bloom is at that point. It's a necessity for her to handle being home alone because the circumstances have come to that, or at least it would seem that way if Applejack didn't give up on her time-sensitive journey immediately to baby Apple Bloom. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into how this episode worked or didn't because I think other reviewers are going to cover that handily, but it's kind of weird to talk about the themes of an episode when they're presented in a sort of careless way. Like, apparently AJ has never heard of a babysitter, to say nothing of how many times we've seen Apple Bloom on her own already. I digress. In the end, Applejack is impressed with what Apple Bloom is capable of. I think it's right to be impressed. Personally, I'm constantly impressed when any young person tells me about how much they can do on their own. We're all raised differently though, so our benchmarks for what's normal and what's actually really cool can vary wildly. Today on the Random Ass Shit channel, we'll be guiding you through a brief exploration of boots in modern fashion. Classically, the boot is considered the most utilitarian of footwear, worn largely by soldiers, hazard workers, and hikers. As such, due to the traditional gender coding of these activities, boots were seen as a very masculine footwear for many years. However, in the 1960s and 70s, there was a boom in boots as a fashion statement, largely propagated by female boot wearers. This liberation of the boot's linear purpose could be seen as part of the late millennia's break with traditional gender coding, as men's fashion staples trickled into normalcy within the female wardrobe. Nowadays, if you search the word boots on Google, you'll find only listing of women's boots, mostly in modern fashion forums. I can say from experience as well that while I don't own any boots at all, every woman I've known has owned at least a pair or two, though it helps of course that most of those women dress in gothic style, if only on occasion. The popularity of boots in Gothic and other subcultures is largely tied to their reputation as the single most fetishized article of clothing in existence. The fetish of boots worn by women is tied to male masochism and female empowerment, as they suggest a refusal to adhere to traditional feminine ideas of fragility. Boots are a staple of the BDSM subculture, which has a lot of influence on the Gothic counterculture of empowerment via self-expression and refusal to adhere to the mainstream or traditional ideas of society. Boots are hot. That's what I'm getting at. That's the point of this section. Applejack looks hot in boots. I'm literally just looking for an excuse to talk about Applejack's hot boots because that was like by far the best thing about this episode. I'm sorry. This has been the Random Ass Shit Channel's brief exploration of boots in modern fashion. We hope you enjoyed this special presentation. The fact that there are clashing opinions regarding my new OC doesn't bother me, but the fact that they're dominating my comment section does, so I think it's time to address this in some depth. From here on out, I will expect all comments about the OC and smoking to fall on this video, and I will delete those comments if they continue to appear on other videos. I've been hearing two things again and again, that my smoking is bad and wrong, and that my pony looks depressing, so let's address these, but first we'll give some history. I have always been obsessed with both characters that smoke and characters that have dark circles under their eyes. I used to run a fan blog for the character Ito Nobue from Ichigo Marshmallow because she was a cool older girl who smokes. I talked in one post even about how Nobue's determination to smoke in the comic had made me want to do the same myself. I've even bought art books and stuff entirely on the basis of seeing cool smoking girls in them. The act of smoking is just really highly romanticized for me. As for dark circles under the eyes, I love how they convey this subtle madness or sleep depravity. In this case, I've traced my love of it back to the manga Tokyo Akazukin, and I've been in love with that kind of art ever since. In fact, if you look at my DeviantArt page, you'll see that on the rare occasion that I draw myself, there are always huge dark circles under the eyes. Even on this channel, the first cartoon avatar that I used was a cross-dressing boy with the same dark circles. When I was first given Mizu Takishima's Digibrony designs, I immediately attempted to draw dark circles under his eyes, but it didn't look right because I couldn't draw in that style. I told Takishima at some point that I'd like to have a set where Digi looks tired or drunk for the sake of certain skits, and she was planning to draw them, but simply never got around to it. The look of Digibrony now comes from a ton of fan art that was drawn by Hannah over the last 6 months or so. She drew Digi as a strung out, tired smoker, and those pictures really resonated with me, quickly becoming my favorite Digi art. One day, Hannah asked me for ideas for fan art, so I told her to draw Digi smoking and looking pissed off. That's when she came up with the headcanon that Digi uses magic to create smoke art, which I thought was brilliant. As I explained on Tumblr, my style change largely came from me getting sick of talking about the same points about why an episode did or didn't work again and again, and getting comments which responded more to my like or dislike of the episode instead of my actual analytical points. I decided to move in a new direction where the videos would be able to hit people on a deeper level, leading to a better comment section, and other than all the bitching about the new design, this totally worked. Every video I've done so far has had a number of long, beautiful comments about how the viewer connected with the video, sometimes to the point that it made them cry. I had to change the visual style as well though, because the whole posing of Digibrony was by far the most boring and inane part of making my videos. I'd gotten so sick of seeing his face in that same set of expressions that I started to resent him. So it seemed obvious to me that if I was going to get someone else to make a bunch of Digi art, I should choose my favorite Digi artist. I knew that Hannah worked really fast and was prolific and that she'd probably keep drawing new Digi art after the initial set. It was actually Hannah's idea to have Digi smoke in the videos so that he could eventually do his smoke art in the videos as well, and I thought that was pretty cool looking, so I approved. In real life, the first time I ever smoked was when I stayed with my mentor Ghost Lightning in the Philippines for a month back in 2011. Ghost Lightning had been smoking for 20 years since he was 14 years old, but he was in the middle of a cold turkey stint. Ghost Lightning had written before about his unapologetic stance on smoking, and about how when he felt it was necessary not to smoke, such as when his wife was pregnant and while raising his baby daughter, he was easily able to quit out of responsibility. I hated smoking the first couple times I did it as it gave me a major headache. When I came back home, it was a little while before I tried it again, borrowing from a friend who smoked as well. But the moment I started smoking regularly was when my mom was hospitalized with cancer, which had nothing to do with smoking, incidentally. My family had consciously decided that we would never let my mom know that any of us were afraid for her health, so when we visited her each day, we'd make a point to act as though she was obviously going to make it through and there was nothing to worry about. Everyone became stressed at home though. I started smoking to deal with that stress each day. Around a year later, I did something similar when I was working at Target. Each morning, I would show up at around 3:30 a.m. and a lot of the times I was dead to the world. I'd have a smoke before work started to wake me up and get my mind ready, and I wasn't alone. Most of my coworkers were doing the same. I understand that for my generation and the one right after mine, smoking is no longer normal. While it's still very normal in a lot of countries and still pretty normal among older people, it's gotten more rare for us now. That's hardly surprising though, considering how our schools and TV ads have continually drilled it into our heads that smoking is the worst thing on earth ever. Of course, knowing a lot of older people who smoke and are in great health is one way to cast doubt, but even more importantly, it's so much easier to stop doing than anyone credits it for. Yes, cigarettes are addicting and can grip some people for life, but that doesn't mean it's the same for everyone. I've kept to a 1 a day, 2 in a day maximum for over 2 years now, with frequent months-long breaks when I finish a pack and just don't buy another one. That's not to say I'm not addicted on some level, but I don't think my addiction has become dangerous, and if it does reach that point, then I'll deal with it when the time comes. Trust me that I am not proud of myself for smoking. I'm not showing it off to brag about it or something, it's just a thing that I do and consider a part of my life. There's something really introspective about smoking for me because I usually do it while out on a walk or listening to music and just being lost in thought. I've written songs about it and stuff lately as it's become a source of some degree of inspiration. To me, the imagery of smoking is tied to conversation and introspection. Every time I smoke, I remember sitting at Ghost Lightning's table while he taught me about literary theory. I remember standing in my driveway with my friends talking about the hardships they were experiencing in their lives. I remember walking through my backyard smoking and recording improv poetry. I remember all the times in the last 6 months that I've brought my friends along on my long walks through the neighborhood, having conversations about life, analysis, and personal shit. So yes, for me, smoking really does capture exactly what I'm going for in these videos. Introspection, conversation, and a chill atmosphere. The reason Digi is in a bar with jazz music playing in the new video is because I wanted to convey the kind of place that I fantasize about having deep life conversations in. It's the kind of imagery that reminds me of Friday morning at last year's BronyCon, when Bronycurious, Bvids, Past Analysis, and other friends sat in the lobby of a hotel for hours getting drunk and discussing Equestria girls. A lot of people thought I was trying to rub it in the faces of everyone who didn't like the smoking in my videos by showing myself smoking in the new video. This was not my intention. I just thought that it wouldn't make any sense for my pony to be smoking but not me. It was purely a consistency thing. I didn't actually expect people to still be talking about the smoking after my rant in the previous video, but apparently I underestimated it. The current Digibrony setup is meant to say 3 AM conversation over cigarettes, because that's how most of my real life conversations are. Digi's tired eyes remind me of how my friends and I are always trying to conquer sleep, to make one more memory or keep the good conversations going. It's the kind of face that conversation addicts have when they're at their best. While we're here, I may as well address this whole personal anecdotes thing too. I don't think this is anything new to my channel, as you'll find countless personal anecdotes if you go back through my videos. Personal anecdotes have always been a huge part of my writing style, and in the old days of my anime blog, they were pretty much the main draw of my posts. Perhaps the biggest series I ever launched on my blog was The Diary of an Anime Lived. It was a series where bloggers would talk about how the things that they'd seen in anime paralleled their own lives, and this led to a lot of powerful and touching stories. The S4 Diary is similar to this concept. It's not just about my personal life, it's meant to draw out the part of the show that resonates with us on a personal level. It's about appreciating the deeper connections that we can feel with the show that go beyond this is good or this is bad. Not to mention it actually ties in with the whole diary thing as part of the structure of season 4 episodes. I didn't really enjoy any of the last 3 episodes very much when I watched them, and if I'd written about them in the traditional review style, it largely would have been me complaining about the very same things I've been complaining about all through season 4. Want my review of Somepony to watch over me? Watch my Castlemania video. For my Breezies video, watch the Daring Don't video. For my Twilight Time video, watch the Castlemania video again. With this new style, I can ignore the structural things that are pretty much the same across multiple episodes and stick to what makes the episodes unique. Other reviewers did a great job of breaking down why Breezies didn't work, so I made a video about what I could take away from the episode if I ignored its problems. And for some people, that was really resonant and interesting. My style change has had the exact effect that I hoped it would. People who appreciate the videos do so on a deeper level than they did before. For every message that I get about how Digi smoking is pointless, I get 2 more demanding I not change back because the new style is better. So I don't plan on changing, but I do want to address it all here just to redirect the discussion of the changes. I hope this helped you to understand where I'm coming from. Ah, fuck. Hold on. I'm coming. Shit! Ah!
Game don't wait, but can't be late.
I'm up. I'm here. Okay, we got a mod pie. You know what makes this show so great? Rarity's head wobble. I'm actually serious. See, the thing about animation is that what makes it special as a medium is how it can express things that real life has trouble with. And I don't just mean that it can give us a world full of magical talking horses, because a comic book could do that too, but it can give us this kind of subtle characterization and humor. We already understand through the script how Rarity is overly dedicated to communicating through fashion, and that her hat is causing problems. But we understand it on an even deeper level, seeing how Rarity can't even keep her head straight. That Rarity doesn't even seem conscious of how the hat is affecting her head tells you about her dedication, because she probably is willing to suffer physical duress in the name of perfectly contrived fashion all the time. And this incident is just one in a long list of examples of how MLP utilizes the medium of animation to the fullest, and that's what makes it such a top-class cartoon. But anyways, this episode isn't about giant hats, it's about a rock farmer, and fuck, it's hot in my room. Let's take this conversation somewhere cooler, please. This may come as a surprise to some of you, but I used to be a total elitist prick. I held my own taste in higher regard than anyone else's, and I looked down on the lowly noobs who didn't share my vastly superior knowledge, especially when it came to anime. It happened a lot in high school and college. People would tell me, "Oh, you're into anime? I'm into anime too." And I'd say, "Oh yeah? What shows?" Naruto, Bleach, Elfen Lied. At this point, I'd be calling them a poser in my head. "What shows do you watch?" they'd ask. Mostly stuff you've probably never heard of. And then the conversation would peter out. See, interests are multifaceted. It's easy for two people to say that they have the same favorite thing, but they often will like that thing for completely different reasons or in completely different ways. Take, for instance, someone whose favorite show is My Little Pony because of how much they love Applejack and her sexy boots, versus someone whose favorite show is My Little Pony because they love reading Luna headcanons. In spite of sharing a favorite show, it's entirely possible that these two will have nothing to talk about with regards to the subject. So you'll see how Pinkie's assumptions that the main six will get along with her sister out of shared interests are wrong-headed. Yes, Maud likes nature walks, but all she sees is rocks, whereas all Fluttershy sees is animals. Maud likes fashion, but whereas Rarity is a hardcore fashion otaku sporting the Legend of Galactic heroes of the fashion world, Maud is attached to the Naruto of the fashion world and isn't really interested in venturing far beyond that. And this is fine. In fact, the real fallacy that comes from thinking of Maud as having a lesser fashion sense is that in reality the senses aren't comparable. Fashion is not one thing, it's a word that describes several different realms of reality. There's fashion, which describes a certain highbrow culture, and then there's fashion as we interact with it on the personal level. Just because I can't walk onto a runway in my bathrobe and MLP pajamas doesn't mean that I don't care about the clothes that I'm wearing, so it's not inaccurate to say that I might be into fashion even if my idea of fashion isn't the same as someone else's. What I'm getting at here is that we shouldn't be too quick to claim that we share interests just because our interests share certain traits, but we also should respect that other people have different ways of engaging with things that we like, and that's a-okay. But while that's all well and good, the bottom line is that even if two people truly do share the same interests, that isn't really a good grounds for sharing a friendship anyways. I've met no shortage of people over the years who shared my interests and even engaged with them in a similar way to myself, but whom I couldn't be friends with just because our personalities didn't gel correctly. My lifestyle and manner of speaking are extremely laid back, and I never ever stop talking. I can't really talk to people who are uptight or who guard their speech or who get bored easily in long conversations. Far more important than sharing the exact same interests or tastes with me, I'd rather be able to have enjoyable talks about our taste and how they compare and contrast. I'll now recite a poem that I wrote. It's about rocks. It's called I Like Rocks. I like rocks. Pockets full of rocks. Keep me weighed down. Grounded to earth, my frown may undercut my mirth, but I don't front. My first love remain true. Igneous, I named you. Hideous, they framed you. But I see truth in gray, black, and brown. Through clay, dirt, and ground, I found a geodesic memory of Mesozoic calamity. Gravity shaping volcanic casing into a beautiful thing. A sedimental gift of history, an igneous and an enigma wrapped in mystery, a small piece of all that's come before, a hardened little story of planetary lore. A deeper kinship than you can understand is the bond that I share with all the rocks of the land. This is my rock. The song's about this rock. I'm a huge fan of both deadpan humor and characters and people who are deeply passionate about something, which is why Adam Johnston is my current favorite YouTuber. Go check that guy out. More importantly, Maud is built on exactly these two characteristics, which made her my new favorite character of Season 4 so far. I've mentioned before how some of my favorite jokes in MLP are the ones where they cut the music and play a dull sound effect over a slow punchline. In this episode, Tank's helicopter sound makes for a fantastic dry noise to set the tone of Maud's arrival. As for Maud meeting the main six, I've been on both sides of the issue. I've got a very tight-knit group of friends, and it can be really difficult for new people to become involved in our group, because it essentially means being friends with and falling into the rhythm of an entire group of people at once. I've also had friends who tried to introduce me to their own friend circles, and I can't remember a single time when I didn't pull the same card as Maud and back away personally. But you know, it doesn't take being super best friends with someone to appreciate when they do awesome things. I've always found it strange actually how people will see someone do something cool and then say how they want to be that person's friend. I, for instance, don't really feel that Errant Signal and I would have the same sense of humor or make for good friends, but I admire his work to no end and have a lot of respect for him. I think that's the real lesson that the main six learn, which is surprisingly unclear. There's such a huge difference between thinking, I don't get along with that person, ergo that person is strange, versus, I don't get along with that person, but I respect and admire them for who they are. It's something we need more of. I know that a lot of people aren't comfortable using the word friend to talk about someone that they aren't that close with, but I'm the type who likes to think of the word friend as meaning friendly, someone you are friendly towards, or who is deserving of friendship, even if it's not something you could give them personally. Friendship is a sort of camaraderie or kinship felt with other people whom I feel are part of the world community that I imagine myself belonging to. Another way of putting it is that any of the main six might have been able to be friends with Maud if they were just a little bit more like her. If they were obsessed with rocks, or if their lives were paced just a little bit slower, they would get along with her. It's not a fundamental difference in character which keeps them from being friends, but a simple difference in lifestyle. The main six do become friends with Maud in the end, but it seems like it's more insofar as being able to imagine themselves in a circumstance in which they could be friends with her. And that about wraps up my thoughts on Maud Pie. Favorite line in the episode? They're all about rocks. Shouts out to Munchie for the background, Hannah for the OC, and TrevCon 2012 for editing the white space out from the OC slides. See you next week. You're probably expecting me to tell a story about how I stole the thunder from one of my little brothers in some creative endeavor in the past. I had the same train of thought, and I asked them both if it had ever happened, but neither one could remember any instance of it happening. My brother Icon Colt thought it was more likely that he had stolen my thunder at some point, and I wouldn't be surprised if that were true. Maybe it's just that he and I have always collaborated, so we aren't terribly competitive for individuality. The other day he had me edit a screenplay he wrote, and if anything, he was as thankful for my ability to make it read better as I was impressed that he'd written something so creative. But this is all besides the point. While I don't relate to the sibling conflict, I can relate to Sweetie Belle's pain just fine. In fact, I think many artists have had the experience of people responding to their work in what they perceive as the wrong ways, even when the audience enjoys the work. Hell, on this very channel I've had that experience. Back when I covered Rarity Takes Manehattan, I was really intrigued by and proud of the analytical points that I raised early in the video, but then I ended up throwing in some lines about how I was upset by Twilight not catching a cab. That scene, honestly, wasn't a big deal, and I felt bad about mentioning it at all when I realized that most of the commenters latched onto that point for discussion when it was easily the least interesting part of my video. And besides that, while I haven't had this experience myself, the episode made me think about what it must be like to work on a large personnel project like Friendship is Magic, and to see the reactions of the audience. Imagine, for instance, being one of the show's Foley artists, putting together a plethora of unique and creative sound effects that make the show that much more special, and then finding that even the hardcore audience only knows who the writers and voice actors are. I imagine that's a little bit demoralizing. I also relate well to Rarity's position as a go-to for anyone in need of her expertise. Rarity makes dresses for money, but also for passion, meaning that she'd be making dresses even if she weren't being paid for it, which is why she ends up doing so much work on the side for family and friends. She can't just let ponies go by with poorly made dresses because it's too important to her that this one thing be done right. Similarly, I make money off of my writing at this point, but I'd be writing all the same if I got paid or not. And likewise, I have family and friends come to me often looking for proofreading, advice, and corrections, and because it's hard for me to leave well enough alone, I usually lend a hand. I'm only lucky that I don't have deadlines like Rarity does, so if a video comes out a day late because I was helping my brother edit a screenplay, I'm not going to be in much trouble. Ask not for whom the sweetie Belle Toils teaches one really great lesson, and unfortunately stops just short of teaching a second one, which I'll explain momentarily. The more important lesson is that context is everything. It's never a good idea to make assumptions about someone's intentions when you don't know all of the details of their situation or state of mind. I can't stress how important this lesson is to me. I get bothered to no end when people are quick to make assumptions or respond to situations that they don't really understand. This is especially true when it comes to news stories, which people tend to watch and comment on at face value, despite the fact that the reporters rarely have much context, nor do they even present all of the context that they have. Taking anything at face value without doing your own research into the subject can be incredibly dangerous. For just one example, I recommend checking out a documentary called Fathead. It's a film whose primary function is to debunk the popular and largely fraudulent documentary Super Size Me, which shaped a lot of modern America's opinions on diet in the last decade in a flawed way. Of course, you shouldn't take Fathead at face value either, and you should do your own research, but it will show you just how easy it is for people to respond to things which they think are true based on extremely limited knowledge from less than trustworthy sources. You know, like American public schools. The point which the episode stops short of making, though, is that everyone deserves the cautious benefit of a doubt. Princess Luna shows Sweetie Belle how she misinterpreted Rarity's actions based on a lack of context, and now that Sweetie knows the context, she forgives Rarity. However, Luna doesn't make it clear enough that these are not exceptional instances. Sweetie Belle only comes around because she now knows the real context of the situation, but will this really teach her not to make assumptions in the future? What we need to take away from this episode is that trusting other people is important. Never jump to conclusions or believe that you know what's really going on if you haven't looked into it. Sweetie's actions aren't only wrong because the reality is that Rarity's intentions were good. Sweetie's actions would be wrong even if she didn't know what was really happening. Sweetie should have trusted her sister and taken a step back to consider the possibilities before jumping to conclusions. Maybe Sweetie does take away this lesson, but I just thought it was important to restate. Anyways, to make one last point, I love that Sapphire Shores' dancing seems to involve ass shaking, just because it feels like a realistic translation of pop star dancing to pony pop star dancing. So much of the dancing in this show is corny and restrained, so it's nice to see a moment where a pop star actually seems to have some of the fashion and sex appeal that would actually make her the pony Beyonce or Lady Gaga. Just a cool touch. People have been bothering me for days about my thoughts on the Season 5 spoilers that were leaked earlier this week. 4chan has been flipping their shit as usual, and ANY Pony already has a pretty long video going into detail about it, so I'll just be sharing my thoughts briefly. You should stick around for an update at the end of the video though, whose topic you may have already guessed by now. For starters, Luna willingly transforming herself back into Nightmare Moon is a fucking rad concept. I know a lot of people thought this was happening in the Season 4 leaks, which led up to the Season 4 premiere, and I'm sure they'll be pleased to know that it's happening for real now. And of course, the fact that Lauren Faust herself is returning to write the episode is sure to excite many fans, and hopefully quell some of the cries that the show was ruined after she left. If anything, her willingness to return is proof that the show hasn't gotten away from her vision, and this gives her the chance to gently push the series back in the direction she wanted it to go. Of course, the far more controversial reveal was that Pinkie Pie is going to have a cult friend throughout the entire season. Personally, I've never been opposed to the idea of pony romance, and considering that Pinkie Pie has already had so many great episodes exploring her character on the conceptual level, I think that giving us a new way to look at Pinkie can only lead to even more fascinating episodes. Plus, I'm just gonna say it, I'm looking forward to the fan art that's bound to come out of this. There was one part of this announcement that pissed me off though. The internet's only Pegasister reviewer, Kimmy Sparkle, is going to get a speaking line in an episode. This isn't the first time an OC has appeared in the show, but it's by far the most prominent role that one has had, and I don't understand why. I know that Josh Haber is a fan of Kimmy Sparkle, but M.A. Larson and Dave Polsky have seen my content and I haven't gotten invited to be in an episode. I know I'm being jealous, but I still think it's a little fucked up. Anyways, now that I've covered all that, it's time for an update. After weeks of outcry from concerned parents and prudes, I've finally decided to bring back the original Digibrony OC. The emo-looking Digi imposter I've been using for the last month or so won't be making a return, and everything will go back to normal. Are you happy now? Happy April Pranks Day! If you didn't figure it out already, that last video was a joke. I'm still using the new OC style, I'm still using everything. There are no Season 5 spoilers revealed. The reason I'm telling you this is just because I was just gonna put out my video for the next episode and let it kind of speak for itself, but then I realized that the video for the next episode is taking a lot longer than I thought to work on. Don't worry, it's taking that long because it's going to be long as shit. Had a lot to say about this episode. Anyway, yeah, just letting you know, it was a prank. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. Warning, even though I loved Leap of Faith and had a ton of fun writing this video, it managed to be the most depressing video I've ever made. Just letting you know. Leap of Faith touches on a lot of interesting little sociological tidbits across its run, so I'm just going to talk about each of them in the order that they arrive. Firstly, Granny Smith telling Apple Bloom about how much she relishes in the memory of being a high diver, but telling her that it was an unwise and unadvised choice of passion. If you've ever watched my video about how to get into analysis, you may remember how I dedicated the entire first 10 minutes of the video to basically asking the viewer why they wanted to get into making analysis videos. That's because I don't really consider this a career choice that I would advise other people to go down, even though I love doing it myself. Whenever people ask me something about making money off of YouTube videos, the first thing I tell them about is all of the reasons YouTube is a shitty employer and why YouTube popularity is both difficult to gain and fickle to hold on to. That's not to say that I discourage becoming a YouTube videographer, but I also don't want to glamorize it. If you talk to people who try to get into the creative arts, you'll hear countless stories of disillusionment and phrases like, "It's not what I thought it was going to be." Because most of the time, it takes a kind of single-minded, blinding obsession to succeed in a creative endeavor. It's the kind of attachment to what you're doing that even if it means you have inconsistent pay and no benefits, which will be true of almost all creative careers, you can't bring yourself to choose any other lifestyle. I'd like to think that if Apple Bloom had a real passion for high diving, Granny Smith and Applejack would have been supportive of her career choice. However, when Apple Bloom finds out that it's not just a fun thrill ride, she backs off the idea. Everything in the world has the potential to kill you. This is a realization I came to in high school, and I think it's one that most people have two possible reactions to. Either realizing that there's nothing you can do about it and not worrying about it anymore, or becoming obsessed with protecting yourself against every possibility. Because it's true, there are so many variables in the way that life events can unfold that the potential for death is always there. And you can do all you can to avoid germs and dangerous situations and bad habits, but internal factors that are under your control are far from the only threats. You never know how or why a germ might find its way into your body, or if some kind of accident is going to happen, or if you're just genetically predisposed to a life-threatening illness, etc. And our culture and media likes to make sure you know just how dangerous the world is because they want to play on your fear to sell you shit, like a miracle tonic that will make you healthy. Just look at nearly every dietary supplement or workout device ever, claiming that they're going to make you lose weight, get healthy, and have hard-toned abs just by using their product. Never mind how it's nearly impossible to do those things without regular exercise and a well-planned diet that fits the needs of your routine. What's crazy about the whole thing is people still buy into it harder than an April Fool's joke about changing my OC back. People have a tendency to leverage undue trust towards people who communicate through mediums like stage, television, and movies, even though those mediums thrive specifically on their ability to manipulate the thoughts and feelings of an audience. I kind of covered this subject already in my video on For Whom the Sweetie Belle Tolls, but it's interesting that this episode tackles the idea even more directly. Moving on to the main points of the episode, Leap of Faith deals heavily with the placebo effect, a psychological and medical phenomenon which you've probably heard of at least once, because it's a pretty popular way to introduce people to the intricacies of the human mind. You can literally type placebo effect into YouTube right now and get a bunch of videos explaining it. But in this episode, the placebo effect simultaneously works positively by giving Granny Smith the confidence to perform at her full potential, spiritual, as well as having the negative effect of making Granny believe that she's more healthy and capable than she really is. If we let it, this could take us down a pretty deep rabbit hole discussing the powers of confidence and faith versus the powers of medicine and the inevitability of death. The best way I can think of to explain what I mean is through myself and my dad. My family is decidedly non-religious, though in the mid-2000s my dad had a big spiritual awakening. In the process of reading a lot of spiritual and philosophical books, he came across one called The Secret, which claims that the secret to getting what you want in life is to believe that you will get those things. Essentially, the idea is that the universe consists of a shared energy between all life forms, and that this energy can be manipulated through individual actions. I'm simplifying it a lot, but bear with me. By pouring a certain thought and energy into the universe, you can make that thought become reality, but only if you believe wholeheartedly that it is going to be true. The book and movie present these concepts almost like an infomercial would, but in reality, this is kind of a high-scale spiritual placebo effect. The universe does not magically give my dad whatever he wants, but by believing that he's feeding his energy into the universe and receiving energy in return, he gains the confidence to set out on his endeavors and make them real. And my dad has had a massive amount of success in his life believing in this. A problem arrived, however, in that because my dad so strongly believed in the power of the human mind and spirit to change their reality, when I was depressed, he thought that the key was to power through it mentally. I had been trying for years to do that and concluded that I was just not going to get through my depression unless I was medicated, and I eventually convinced my dad to let me see a psychiatrist and get prescribed something. And I can say this, those were definitely not placebos. I know because they had side effects which I wasn't aware of until they were already hitting me. My brother also went through a ton of antidepressants before finding ones that actually worked for him, so clearly expecting the pills to work didn't do shit. My point here is that it can be dangerous to trust the placebo effect alone, because the mind is not all powerful. If I break my arm right now, I don't think anyone's going to tell me to will it back together, and there are some unseen physical ailments, such as chemical depression, that we can run the risk of ignoring by thinking that the placebo effect will fix them. Ideally, the placebo effect should be used in combination with real medicine. I've mentioned before how when my mom was in the hospital with cancer, all of her family and friends consciously agreed to never show any fear in front of her so that she wouldn't think she was dying. My mom had stage 4 Burkitt's lymphoma, and we were told that had she been brought to the hospital even a day later than she was, she would have died. Her fight got to some incredible lows, but she was always so confident that she was going to live that she fought against the cancer with all of her might. And I really do think that if she didn't have that confidence in her survival, she wouldn't have made it all the way through her treatment. Holy shit! This is the most depressing video I've ever made! I can't believe I'm talking about My Little Pony right now. Quick, Gibbon, make them laugh.
Something funny, okay, what do you call a bear with no ear? Anything you like, cause he can't hear you, ha 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 ha. Also, you could call him a bee, cause of the way it's spelt. You know, with the B-E-A-R. Oh, that'll get him going.
Okay, you are just the worst at this. Jesse, why don't you try?
I got a joke. It's a funny joke. You're gonna like it. Girl goes to the doctor. She says, "Doctor, I'm having these abdominal pains. I think I might be pregnant." So the doctor examines her, and after the examination, he says, "Well, I hope you like changing diapers." And the woman goes, "Oh my God, I'm really pregnant." The doctor goes, "No, you've got bowel cancer."
I don't... What have I become? While we're doing Intro to Psychology, Leap of Faith also touches on the subject of herd mentality, and if you think I'm about to draw an elaborate comparison between this episode and the so-called Brony herd, then you are correct. People tend to underestimate how easily we can influence one another with our actions. When you think about it, we don't really learn anything on our own. All of our learning comes from adapting to the world around us, so really all of our actions are influenced by others. Not all of these actions are directly correlated to someone telling us to do something. If I yell, "Fuck this!" right now, it's not because someone told me to, but it's also not like I made those words up, nor like I developed a mindset that yelling "fuck this" in the middle of an analysis video is acceptable on my own. Indeed, up to a certain point, everything we learn from other people, and we kind of just have to trust that we've learned everything correctly. This trust is both necessary and dangerous, because we don't have time to prove that every single thing we learn is true, but we're also damn near guaranteed to learn a number of false truths in our lives that we're just going to take as fact. I mean, how many of us grew up thinking that velociraptors looked like this and that Pluto was a planet, only to learn the truth and be devastated years later? And of course, most of us are going to leverage more of our trust towards people that we, rightly or wrongly, believe to be trustworthy. And this trust isn't only or even primarily built on the person's truthfulness. It's built more on how much we want what they say to be true. And that can be a force of good as well. When someone we like or respect tells us something that we want to hear, it can be close to an enlightening experience. And that, I think, has a lot to do with the Brony fandom's general message of positivity. Say whatever you want about Bronies. All of them are different, and everyone is going to have a different experience with them. However, there is no question that on the whole, the Brony fandom has promoted and often lived up to a standard of kindness and acceptance. This is something discussed at length in episode 3 of The Elements of Brony, which you should have watched by now, and if you haven't, you totally must. The reason The Herd has been a force of good is that so many big names in the community pushed it that way. So many of the early content creators pushed the message of love and tolerance, and so many advertised charities and other kind-hearted gestures that it permeated through the crowd. I've seen it happen firsthand when I've promoted things in the past that grew in popularity on the basis of my endorsement, as well as in the general feelings that my videos have inspired in so many viewers when their thoughts were affirmed by my own. Even I've given to charities that other Bronies promoted. But this is also where we stumble upon Applejack's dilemma. To pull a quote you probably all know, with great power comes great responsibility. The power to influence other people is something that can be easily abused, and it's not always easy to know how you should be using your influence in the right way. I've made a point to limit my endorsements in my videos, specifically because I want them to remain credible. If I was constantly telling you to go look at stuff and not all of it was up to snuff, not only would you quickly get burned out on recommendations, but you'd also stop trusting me to endorse high quality stuff in the long run. If I only promote things that I consider to be comparable to or better than my own videos, then I know that I'll keep people's hopes up for things that I introduce them to in the future. And I have had the experience in the past of encouraging people to put time or even money and effort into things that ultimately disappointed them, so I'm careful not to let it happen again. All of this comes down to a matter of marketability. Trustworthy opinions are marketable ones. When you let the opinion of a reviewer sway your decision to go see a movie, it means that you trust that reviewer, and the movie's marketing department are going to want to promote the fact that trustworthy reviewers enjoy their movie in order to draw people into watching it. That's exactly what Flim and Flam do with Applejack. They take her reputation as the most dependable of ponies and make it into a marketing gimmick, which in all fairness would be a great idea if their product was actually up to snuff and Applejack wasn't the equivalent of a studio paid reviewer. The Flim Flam brothers convince Applejack to lie to the public under the basis that ignorance is bliss. This falls in with the smarm effect, like when people say things like, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Either one is an extreme stance to take, and like everything else in life, sticking to one extreme is going to be dangerous. The other extreme would be hardcore social Darwinism, where we say that people who don't know better deserve to be tricked, which isn't helpful either. What we need is an ideal middle ground. Help people to understand the world around them with all of its harshness, and give them the tools to deal with that harshness. Don't tell people what makes them happy, tell them what is going to help them to become better people. And I think that about wraps up what I've got to say about this episode. I'm sorry that this video is so late, and the next one is probably going to be late as well. Honestly, I don't know what I'm doing with my life right now. My girlfriend and I just broke up, my channel isn't getting nearly as many hits as it used to, and I can't figure out how to promote my video game and anime videos. I've got no plans for the future, and it's kind of causing a minor existential crisis. So I might take a break from making videos for a little bit to play through a bunch of video games and do other weird shit with all the free time I have now, or I might make a ton of new videos as soon as a burst of inspiration hits. I really don't know. But I do want you guys to understand something. I'm not making these videos to show off or to be some cool smart guy or to depress you or to fuck with you or anything like that. I just want to invite you in. This is the only way I really know how to communicate with people. So for those of you who stick around and still watch these videos like the conversation that they're meant to be, I extend my sincere thanks. See you next week. A little something some of y'all might not know about me is that I've been rapping laughing a lot lately, just like the greatest pony. Miss Pink spittin' fly ass raps about history. The mystery of this ep's real meaning will be revealed, unsealed by my sick flow of analytical prose. I'll hit the nail right on the nose, have you going, damn, that boy can analyze. Through my eyes, you'll see things in new light and think, dang, this show's a lot more deep than I thought. Glad I bought the DVD. How do you wear your hat? I sported Fresh Homes. Word. You may have gathered this from some of my comments in the last few videos, but I've got a lot of problems with the American school system, and I imagine these problems apply to a lot of other school systems as well, though I can't speak from experience. The current American school system is built around 20th century industrialism. Kids are largely put through the same processing and routine, completely ignoring the fact that every individual learns differently and develops at their own pace. There's a somewhat famous video about this that I linked a few weeks ago and will now link again in the description, and it does a much more thorough job of explaining this, so I highly recommend checking it out. But for the purpose of this video, I'll be addressing educational concerns on a more personal level. Rainbow Dash is the kind of student who would be failed by our school system because it doesn't understand how to educate her. Twilight represents a teacher, like too many that I've met, who becomes frustrated with her students' apparent inability to care about what she's teaching, and the fact that her potential is going to be squandered over one subject that she doesn't excel in. Rainbow is fortunate, however, that her teacher is both a friend and a dedicated one at that, and that she has so many friends caring for and observing her to figure things out. In one of our schools, her teachers would never have time to get to know her and examine her learning habits until they could find a method that works for her, because they would be worried about too many other students. One who falls out of the system is left to fend for themselves and loses out on the opportunities that they could have had if someone had taken the time to get them on their feet. It's hard to blame teachers for not having the time to take care of every student in a unique way when the system they work in is so broken, but the problem is exacerbated because so many teachers don't even seem to understand or be aware of how different a school experience is for the individual student. When I was in 12th grade, I had a government teacher who was new to our school and had been teaching for only a few years. She taught all of her lessons extremely by the book, and even though she really seemed to care about the kids in class learning her lessons, she had no skills at improvising or changing the lesson to suit the needs of her students. There were several times in class when she'd fruitlessly try to explain something the same way again and again, until eventually I would raise my hand and ask her to let me explain it differently. I would strip out the more complicated language and her incessant attempts at political correctness to explain the concept in the most basic way possible, so that everyone would understand the subject at a core level before moving along. What my teacher didn't seem to understand is that the students, for the most part, do not think the way that she does. They don't bring the same knowledge or habits to the table that she does. That's because teachers, by and large, are nerds by necessity. Most teachers are bound to have great study habits and broad general knowledge because they have to make it through 6 years of college in order to actually teach. Someone like Twilight, who takes a lot of their knowledge for granted, doesn't realize when she tells Rainbow Dash that highlighting separates the wheat from the chaff, that Rainbow might not even know what that expression means, much less how to identify what stuff is the wheat. Hell, to this day, I still have no fucking idea what the point is of highlighting shit when studying. Then again, I don't study. People have been asking me for years why I haven't become a teacher, and the answer is simply that, much like Rainbow Dash, I don't have the study skills to be successful in school. I've never been particularly good at learning something just by having it explained to me in exact detail. I will get bored or unable to see why I'm supposed to care about the subject or how it applies to my life. I learn better by experiencing things and then analyzing my experience. I didn't learn how to write well by taking writing classes, with the exception of one piece of advice a college professor gave me to focus on simplifying my writing, which became a huge part of my editing process soon thereafter. Mostly, I learned by reading other things and analyzing what I liked about those things. As an anime blogger, I found that it was much more interesting when bloggers talked about broad concepts relating to a show rather than reviewing the show's quality or talking about their opinions of each episode. I liked it when bloggers took a personal approach to their work, and I got to see how their appreciation of anime related to who they were as a person. And I loved learning background details of the shows that I was watching and tracing the careers of the people behind them. I never took a class on video editing either, which in fairness might be kind of obvious, but again, I learned via analysis. I watched a shitload of YouTube videos and figured out what I liked about them. I knew that high audio quality was an absolute absolute must for me to finish a video. I knew I hated to see black backgrounds and static images for more than a few seconds at a time, and I knew that I liked speakers who talk very fast and get to the point quickly. That is my version of Rainbow Dash's learning by flight. Just as she pays attention to every detail around her when she's flying, I pay attention to every detail of a video. When I consume media, I analyze every aspect of it relative to myself and my own experience so that I can understand it on a deeper level. Now, I know I've said that with this series of videos I'm trying to focus just on the central themes of the episodes, but in this case I couldn't be satisfied failing to mention how much I enjoyed this one. Besides the fact that the first 10 minutes or so felt eerily like every Twidash fanfic I've ever read, the episode had this great sense of pacing and to-the-point storytelling that made it feel more complete than a lot of episodes do. The scene where Twilight and Dash fly together is almost weirdly silent, and that makes it feel more poignant than it would have otherwise. And Pinkie Pie's rap, my god, it was perfect. The fact that it's in 4:3 aspect ratio and even has a degraded sound quality was incredible, and a ton of effort seemed to be put into animating her movements throughout the scene. Very cool. I'm also glad that this episode tackled the subject matter that it did, not only because I'm obviously pretty interested in it already to begin with, but also because it has been bothering me forever how Twilight doesn't seem to understand alternative teaching strategies. I've always considered it a huge mark of Twilight's youth and lack of understanding that she doesn't realize her teaching methods don't work for others, so seeing it broken down finally was super gratifying. Anyways, that about wraps up my thoughts on testing 1, 2, 3. I'll see you on the next one. I wonder if the Hub was aware of this episode's release coinciding with this year's Record Store Day, upon which a few hundred old and rare albums are reissued and distributed to record stores around the country, inspiring vinyl enthusiasts to flock en masse and expand their collections. I was excited for Record Store Day since I started collecting vinyl back in January. However, I didn't realize how competitive it would be, and since I decided to watch the new Pony before heading out, the one album I really wanted was already sold out by the time I got there. This episode has a lot going on between its 3 storylines, and ultimately has 2 different morals, one of which I found rather baffling. That is, Twilight's lesson that there is a sentimental value in the books that she was planning to get rid of, and so she should hold on to them. Now, I've always been a big-time collector. To give you a sense of how big of one, let's take a tour around my room. Bear in mind that a chunk of this is stuff from my brother's collection that he didn't want in his room anymore, but still, the majority of this was collected through my teen years and is where literally all of the money that passed through my hands in those years went. Nowadays, I mostly collect things for the sake of supporting the creators that make them, which is why I started my vinyl collection. However, I am hesitant to actually endorse the mentality of collecting things other than to support artists, because there's a very thin line between being a collector and being a hoarder, and I've seen this line all too well. The reason I was such a collector growing up is that my mom was a collector. She approached everything from the mindset of you need the whole set for it to be valuable, or you need to have the mint condition copy, etc. As you can see in these clips of my mom's office, she's got a formidable collection herself, but as much as I dig having a huge collection, you can run into problems as well if you're not willing to get rid of anything. My mom was always against throwing things out, which is understandable considering that in her early 20s she lost most of what she owned in a house fire. For instance, she collected all of mine and my brother's school papers by keeping them all in whichever backpack we had for that year. She would also hold on to shoeboxes on the off chance they'd be useful, since as kids we used them a lot in school projects, but she still had them all after all of us were out of elementary school, and they were just taking up space. These are just some quick examples. When the TV series Hoarders came out, my mom took it as a wake-up call, not only for herself, but for the realization that the reason she was such a hoarder is because her mom was a far more extreme one, who would buy useless things constantly and never get rid of any of it. She still does that, incidentally. Maybe I'm biased from seeing the hoarding tendencies of my mom and grandma and trying to keep a distance from those tendencies myself, but I am not a fan of holding on to things just because they happen to be a part of my past. I will routinely sell old manga, DVDs, and video games that I don't like anymore to make room in my collection for new things, and I generally don't value looking into the past as much as I do looking into the present and future. The problem I have here is that Twilight was fully ready to get rid of those books. She was approaching the matter from an angle of practicality. Her library was too full and she needed room for new things, her old books largely being irrelevant. Throughout the episode, I was expecting a scene where Twilight would explain to Pinkie how the value of her trade wasn't in the items she would receive, but in knowing that she was passing on the gift of knowledge to a new generation of bright young faces who want to learn and grow. Instead, Pinkie causes Twilight to have a nostalgia trip and hold on to the books. But isn't that backwards? The books are mementos that remind Twilight Twilight of her past, but the memories are not of the books themselves, which she no longer needs. I can tell you the house I lived in, the people I was friends with, and the kinds of things that I was doing when I read Rave Master, which was the first manga I ever got into, and I sold that series like 7 years ago because I didn't enjoy reading it anymore. Maybe my memory is better than Twilight's, but I just can't get behind the logic Twi uses to hold on to her books. If I rewrote the episode, Twilight would have given all the books to the kid with the broken pen, and that kid would have loved them. Moving along, the Rainbow Shy storyline reminded me of the Japanese folktale of the Straw Millionaire, which you probably know better as the quest line to get the big Goron sword in Ocarina of Time. The story is about a poor man who starts off with a piece of straw and, through a series of lucky trades, ends up a millionaire in the end. This concept has been used in a number of RPG games and is kind of a staple of the Legend of Zelda franchise. The difference here is that Rainbow Dash already has an end goal in mind and plots out all the trades before she manages to start making them, sort of like playing Zelda with a strategy guide. The shop full of Discord lamps had to have been inspired by an MLP convention. I realize that the writer for this episode is new and probably hasn't been to any cons yet, but the way it's presented just seems too perfect. My friend Cider, with whom I co-host the pub crawl on Celestia Radio, made a few $1,000s at PonyCon AU selling 3D printed Twilacanes, so I can easily see Discord lamps being a hot item for collectors. And of course, I'll probably get yelled at if I don't mention how apparently in Equestria you can totally sell your friends into servitude. Now, I can easily see people getting needlessly mad at Rainbow Dash over this because I've come to realize that when a character acts like a dick for a little bit and then learns their lesson, the viewers never ever forgive them. But leaving that aside, if any pony here is truly evil, it's the woman selling the book who actually offered to trade it for the indentured servitude of Fluttershy. Like, seriously, what the fuck? I don't really have anything else to say about this though, other than that it was hilarious. Meanwhile, the rest of this episode was a fantastic Rarajack ship fic. These two never stopped being adorable together, and this kind of argument was just so them. Wrapping up with some final notes, I love how there are crystal ponies just walking around at this trade fair, but I don't love how a lot of the background ponies in this episode look like mediocre OCs. Also, most of the guest voices were terrible, and even the main six had a lot of weirdly bad takes throughout the episode, almost like they had to rush the recording sessions or something. It was really weird. It sucks that I couldn't get the album that I wanted for Record Store Day. But hey, at least I got Obsidian by Baths. And that's even better, because I can listen to it with my friends. Which I could have done with Watershed. And I'll probably never find it again. And I could have bought this at any time. God damn it. Is the moral good? Sure. Relatable? Definitely. But the situation, when I put myself in it, got me thinking. So, let's say I'm Spike. The woman I love, and it is an unrequited love, has just become all-powerful. In the process, she has decided that I'm the only person who understands her and gets to be at her side. She seems to be the most passionate she's ever been, and she's focusing more attention and affection on me than ever. I'll admit it, I've got an evil switch in my brain, and this situation would probably flip it. I'd throw myself at the hooves of my demon queen and stand at her side as she bent the fabric of reality to her will. I would totally go along with whatever she wanted as long as I knew she loved me and was happy with the results of her actions. And as a true villain, it would be my downfall. One day, Rarity would alter the world or myself in some fundamental way that I don't want her to. Either she would alter me into a different, more subservient person and I would lose my will, or if I retained my will, then she would view me as a traitor and destroy me, before her path of chaos degrades her mind and body into nothingness and the entire universe is destroyed by her power. Oh, I just got a Skype message from friend of the show, Urishima. It's pretty long, too. So, if you don't mind me talking about this for a bit, there was a shitload of conflicts in this episode, wasn't there? I guess so. There was the be honest with your criticism, especially with your friends thing. Right, that's the obvious one. This kind of thing comes naturally to me. Maybe because my first name is Conrad, which means honest counselor. People tell me I'm very blunt. Then, Rarity learning that form follows function. Another good one to learn. Sometimes Rarity seems to understand this concept perfectly, and other times not so much, so I'd call it an inconsistent characterization, but still a relevant lesson for her to learn. As Tommy Oliver pointed points out in his video, this episode does a lot to communicate about creative endeavors, and this is one of the things that is challenging for a lot of artists. And the ability of just making anything you want happen in a flash, making whatever you create with this ability ultimately meaningless, because in craft, the creation process is an integral part of it all, including overcoming limitations. I would definitely agree with this, but at the same time it's hard to say. Yes, hardship is an integral part of the resultant product, but does that mean a product with no hardship wouldn't be as good? It would certainly be different, but let's consider a situation. My videos, for instance, have developed into their current form mostly through adversity. The adversity of finding an audience is why I adopted the video format. The adversity of dodging YouTube's Content ID system is why I adopted the OC, and continued attempts to dodge Content ID have influenced the way I present the footage in the videos. These things have affected the content in a lot of ways, some of which have enriched and deepened the overall product. However, if I could will my videos into being fully animated spectacles, would they not then be better? It's something that I don't care to learn how to do and would take way too much of my time otherwise, but if I could just beam it into creation, then why wouldn't I? Hard work makes you appreciate the benefits of that work more, certainly, but having benefits from light work also facilitates more work to be done. Rarity's reaction to her power is exactly what mine would be. Oh hey, my production rate is increased, so now I can do all the things I've ever wanted to do. I could go through all of the ideas for videos, films, novels, whatever I've got backlogged, and make all those things happen. The issue raised by your point, however, is less a question of how instantly creating something affects its quality and the attachment you have to it, and is more a question of the logistics of this magic. Because it is true that the idea of willing an art piece into existence doesn't make sense because there are too many things that you wouldn't know until you're making said art piece. Does Rarity know the correct measurements and mechanics of the buildings and chariots she's causing to exist? Does she already know how to construct all of these things and is literally just willing the materials into existence and skipping the effort? Is it more like she's doing the entire project in an infinitely short amount of time? Or is she also willing into existence her knowledge of how to make the product? If I willed this video into existence, I would have no clue previously what the exact arrangements and selections of words would be, because those things are not premeditated, but emergent in the process of creation. So if I willed a video into existence, would I also be causing myself to have known all of the words and arrangements instantaneously? See, this is why I hate powers like this whenever they come up. They make me think way too fucking much about something that's completely hypothetical. Also, the book, or the spell of the book, had a mind of its own, which scares the crap out of me. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by this, but I'd say it's more like the spell is automatic. Like, does it actually think for itself, or is it following a requisite set of rules? I feel like if it had a mind of its own, it would be able to avoid undoing. Again though, not sure what you mean, but thanks for the topic suggestions. A round of applause for Urishima, please. Now, I know that some of you will be frustrated with me for saying this, but Spike to me is a fundamentally uninteresting character. Yes, I think he's well written in this episode with a believable and relatable arc, which Tommy Oliver did a perfectly fine job of detailing in his video. But Spike just isn't a character I'm interested in. Besides having one of the most consistently excellent voice performances in the cast, Spike just doesn't have much going for him in terms of intrigue. His personality is indistinct, inconsistent, and undefined, and I've never connected with him really on any level. He doesn't have a strong continuous arc like Rainbow Dash or Twilight, nor depth of character like Rarity or Pinkie Pie, nor do I want to marry him like Applejack or Fluttershy. Even when Spike is written decently, I already care so little about him that it's hard for me to feel anything watching his episodes. And that's it, really. Again, check out Tom's video if you want more of a close reading of the episode's strengths and weaknesses, but for me, all that really grabbed me about this episode was how much I wanted to spiral into a horrific villainous downfall with sexy evil Rarity. We're finally here, the end of season 4 and the last weekly episodic MLP analysis that you'll likely see on this channel. Yes, I've still got a few more episodes to cover here and there, but for the most part I'm ready to move on. The S4 diary is already over. I wrote and recorded a giant memoir post for it, but it was 20 minutes long and I never got around to making a video for it, so you can find a link to the audio in the description if you're interested. But for now, let's move along and talk about this beast of a a finale. My feeling towards this episode is one of ambivalence, and in this video I'll basically approach it from both the angle of thinking it's a fantastic way to end season 4, but also from the angle that I didn't really enjoy it. On my first viewing, I treated it as a standalone episode, which I kept mentally comparing to the previous season finales, and as a result I completely disliked it. However, once I thought of it more as the resolution to all the loose ends of season 4, I found a lot to like. Getting right to the core of this episode, the conclusion to Discord's arc is the biggest point of interest. All throughout season 4, Discord has been characterized as an is he or isn't he good guy, leading audience members to expect some kind of possible betrayal from him along the line. The betrayal does happen, but not as a result of Discord relapsing on his development. He's actually swayed to the dark side by the new villain, Tyrek. And only after he's double-crossed by Tyrek does he realize not only how much he's actually changed, but how much it sucks to be had by someone you considered a friend. It's a powerful and brilliant way to resolve Discord's character arc, so long as you can suspend your disbelief to the fact that Discord changed so much he no longer expects other villains to double-cross him. Tyrek's involvement in the storyline is mostly interesting for the effect that it has on Discord, and the decision to have Discord not only provide Twilight with the final key to the magic seed box, but even to figure out the secret of the keys himself was a stroke of brilliance. Discord's arc alone is enough to make this one of the better episodes of the season, and certainly puts it above the likes of the Crystal Empire as far as adventure arcs go. However, the narrative which bothered me across these episodes was that of Twilight Sparkle. I appreciate that the episode actually addresses how useless Twilight's been as a princess so far, but I can't help feeling like we're treading old ground here. It seems like every time Twilight's character is in focus, she's feeling really down about her ability to be useful, only to be given some kind of ridiculous world-saving task which helps her to gain her confidence again. You could argue that in real life people tend to go into slumps anytime they aren't being challenged, but I don't feel like the show is mindfully recreating that feeling, and it just comes off as repetitive. Moreover, the way that this issue was addressed in the end is pretty much to restate exactly the same shit that Twilight learned not only in the season premiere, but in the series premiere as well, that friendship is what will see her through and ultimately provide purpose in her life.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
Maybe this is a case of me having thought faster than the show. I remember calling Twilight the Princess of Friendship as early as the season 3 finale, and when you're watching the themes unfold in the show as you go along, they appear to be plain as day. But I guess there's nothing wrong with outright stating the point here in the finale. It just feels repetitive for those of us who have been paying attention all along. And by paying attention, I mean dedicating large chunks of our lives to meticulously analyzing the shit out of everything. But what bothered me more than anything is that I didn't feel like Twilight actually earned the final key from Discord. Each member of the main 6 received their key at a time when staying true to their element taught another pony a lesson, and that pony repaid their gratitude with an item. Twilight doesn't actually teach a lesson to Discord though. He learns his lesson on his own when Tyrek betrays him, and he even attributes his realization of friendship's importance to Fluttershy rather than Twilight. The weirdest thing about this is how easy it would have been to handle better. Twilight asks for Discord to be released from the bubble as one of her friends. All it would have taken is for Discord to realize the magic of friendship in this moment instead of a few moments earlier, and it would totally change the context of the scene. I don't think that Discord giving Twilight the key anyways breaks the episode. It's still evident that Discord and Twilight want to consider one another friends, and that one way or another Discord has learned the lesson that Twilight preaches. I just think that thematically it was a huge missed opportunity that Twilight gets her key from someone who totally attributes his lesson to Fluttershy. I did think that the idea to give Twilight a round table with all of her friends instead of an individual throne room was fantastic. It's a shame that the two sisters' castle didn't amount to much in the end, but there's a great thematic parallel to be drawn between the way that castle embraced the balance of night and day, while this one embraces the harmony of friendship. At some point next season, I'd love it if Celestia and Luna moved back into that castle, and if the Crystal Empire was somehow retconned into having a second throne for Shining Armor just for the sake of thematic consistency. While we're on the subject of Twilight's castle, let's dive into my biggest overall gripe with this episode, that it is arguably among the most visually displeasurable episodes in the entire series. And I don't just mean because of the rainbow power, which I actually didn't mind as much as most people did just because it's only on screen for like 5 seconds. Twilight's treehouse was fucking iconic. It was one of the coolest and most imaginative structural designs in cartoons, and I've always wanted to own a playset of it. It's just so fucking cool to look at, and it really embodied what Ponyville was all about. It had this homey, old-timey feel to it with a vast library, a cozy loft, a cool basement area, and all these neat little balconies and details. This treehouse symbolized what Ponyville is and what Twilight is perfectly. And then they blew it up. Then they replaced it with what is easily the shittiest structural design in the entire series. It looks uneven, unbalanced, and unnatural. The aesthetic seems to be borrowed from the Crystal Empire for some reason, and it looks completely out of place in Ponyville. The rigid, rocky surfaces and uncomfortable stone thrones don't have an ounce of hominess to them, and even though it's supposed to be a castle, the interior lacks any of the pomp and circumstance that the other castles bear. It looks like a dark little cave built into a weird crystal tree. Living or working in this place would be a constant source of stress and paranoia because it feels like you're in a fucking dungeon. I can't overstate how much I hate this fucking castle. It is possibly the single worst asset that has ever been put into the show, and I never want to see it again. The pacing was really great though, easily the best pacing of any of the show's two-part episodes. Everything felt very measured and complete. I heard some people saying that something or other was rushed, but I couldn't even tell which part they might be talking about, except maybe the part where they used the rainbow power, which I'm pretty sure we all wanted to be rushed, so I don't see the problem there. Altogether, this is the first time when an MLP two-parter has felt structurally sound. And it comes really close to also being the first two-parter with a completely solid and comprehensible narrative. But then a long stream of bullshit comes out of Celestia's mouth and the whole thing turns into a Dragon Ball Z episode. Wait, what's going on? Alright, so in the middle of this two-part finale, Discord and Tyrek have teamed up and are reenacting Magic.mov all over Equestria. Around this time, Celestia says that with their powers combined, the four Alicorns won't be able to stop Tyrek without him eating their magic, because he's got Discord at his side. Fair enough, I don't know how she's getting these ideas, but then again she learned about Tyrek's return through random-ass night visions, so it's safe to say that she just knows shit. Celestia's master plan to avoid Tyrek eating their power is to give all that power to Twilight, whom Tyrek doesn't know about yet, and have her hide? Question 1. What the fuck do the princesses expect Twilight to do? If she's not powerful enough to take on Tyrek, even with the power of 4 princesses, then is she just meant to sit around idly while Tyrek takes over Equestria? Twilight doesn't seem to know what to do either, and all we get are some scenes of her trying to manage her magical overdose before Tyrek inevitably finds her. Did the princesses really think Tyrek was never going to find out about Twilight? I mean, they just said that he's working with Discord, and Discord knows about Twilight, so he was obviously going to tell Tyrek at some point. And when Tyrek does find her and blows up her treehouse, Twilight forgoes the whole plan to hide anyways and starts confronting him head on, even though she's not supposed to be able to beat him with her level of power. But here's where it really falls apart. Twilight battles Tyrek to a stalemate, meaning that with her current level of power, Twilight is simply on par with Tyrek. But mind you that at this point, Tyrek has not only eaten the immense power of Discord, meaning that fighting him is no different from fighting him and Discord together, but he's also gained a considerable amount of power from eating the main 6, along with anyone else that he devoured, in between Twilight gaining the power of the other Alicorns and the big showdown. In other words, the combined strength of Tyrek and Discord is only now on par with the combined strength of 4 Alicorn princesses. Had Celestia never come up with this ridiculous plan to have Twilight gain everyone's magic, and the 4 princesses had just gang rushed Tyrek before he grew more powerful, they probably would have kicked his ass. I guess prophetic visions and random assumptions don't account for much after all. So if all this is true, then why the hell is Celestia's ploy even included in the episode to begin with? Why shoehorn in such a convoluted and broken plot element that totally didn't even need to be there? Could it be that the writers wanted an excuse for Twilight to become stupidly powerful so that she could have a gigantic over-the-top beam spam fight with Tyrek? Ever since writing for the 4th season was completed, Megan McCarthy has been bragging about how epic the season was going to be. She's been hyping this season finale like crazy, and even talked about how they had to write out certain things that Hasbro thought was taking it too far. It's obvious to me that Megan McCarthy was making a point to outdo herself by having the most bombastic finale humanly imaginable to occur in a pony show. And I'm sure that's going to be just fine with a lot of people. Giant laser beams shooting multicolored lights can be a lot of fun, and they've certainly worked for no shortage of anime series. However, personally, I just don't see the fucking point of putting this gigantic battle into the middle of a pony episode. My friend Neil X made the case that this fight is thematically interesting because it shows how violence wasn't able to defeat the enemy, but the power of friendship was. That's a fair enough statement, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the narrative of this particular episode, which is about teaching a friendship lesson to Discord and making Twilight remember that she's the princess of friendship. Maybe if there was any dialogue in the episode whatsoever about how overpowering an enemy is not the way to handle it, I'd be more ready to accept this reasoning for why the fight is in this episode. As it stands, it just seems like a gigantic waste of time for a spectacle that I could literally get anywhere else. I've seen a lot of people praising the visuals of this fight scene a lot, and I think that's a huge overreaction to what is basically just pulsating lights and colors, with almost static flash objects darting across the screen. Now, I will admit that I'm very particular about action scenes in movies and shows. I'm of the opinion that if you're going to have a fight scene just for the hell of it, that fight scene had better be seriously fucking impressive, either in terms of visuals or choreography, because otherwise I have no reason to care when I can just be watching a better fight show instead. MLP's fight scene isn't bad at all, and it could have been much worse. The colored beams do look pretty appealing, and there's a good use of space, and I mean it's Twilight Sparkle shooting Marisa Kirisame's Master Spark out of her horn, but it's nothing more than a series of big laser beams and rocks and ponies getting tossed around for a few minutes ending in a stalemate. This could just as easily have been Twilight blasting Tyrek with her biggest laser, realizing that she hasn't done shit to him, and then Tyrek doing the same in return, and it would have conveyed an equal amount of information. Yes, the battle of attrition has a little more weight to it, and I'll admit, I don't hate this fight scene as much as I'm making it sound like I do, but the reason I'm being so harsh on it is that I can't help but see the possibilities of what could be done if this fight scene hadn't been there. First of all, if Twilight never confronted Tyrek directly, then we never would have learned how fucking pointless and contrived Celestia's plan had actually been. Secondly, if we had those extra couple of minutes back, we could have fleshed out the interconnection between Twilight and Discord's narratives. Instead of this battle ever occurring, Tyrek could have offered the deal for Twilight's friends right from the beginning. Discord could have learned about forgiveness from Twilight setting him free, and the two of them could have shared a moment together where they affirmed themselves as true friends once and for all. Then, when Discord handed Twilight the amulet, it would have felt earned, and then Twilight and friends could have done the whole Super Saiyan thing and fired a giant laser beam at Tyrek anyways. Just by removing this one time-wasting fight and adding in a few lines between Discord and Twilight, the majority of the problems that I had with this episode narratively could have been cleaned up in one fell swoop. What leaves me feeling so ambivalent about this finale is that it comes so close to being just right, but it never quite makes it there. The things that make it interesting are undercut by design elements that are stupid and boring. For example, let's have a look at Tyrek. This guy has a pretty cool satanic character design. His voice acting in the first part of the episode is really fantastic, though he pretty much loses all semblance of personality once he turns giant. His motivations are really generic and straightforward, but that's okay because his purpose is really to progress the character arc of Discord, which he does exceptionally well. Tyrek's biggest strength as a character is that he's probably the most legitimately threatening villain that the series has ever had. But in terms of screen presence, he's completely boring as a villain. Anytime he's not bantering with Discord, he's just standing there, eating magic and gloating. Maybe it's just me, but I thought the magic eating looked really stupid. Remember how Discord was this really active villain that moved all around the frame and did all kinds of crazy stuff? He was super memorable even before he made a return appearance. Remember how Chrysalis was like this shape-shifting bug lady who sings an epic song while thrashing a bunch of wedding attire? That was totally memorable. Tyrek spends most of his screen time either standing still or walking and talking about how powerful he's going to be. He's a boring and unmemorable villain in his own right, and I just don't care about him. A lot of people had a problem with the recapping that happens towards the end of the first part, to remind us how all of the main six got their objects. Personally, I thought it was kept to an appropriate length, only actually showing us 2 scenes from past episodes, both mercifully short and with voiceover. While we as viewers have known for a long time that the objects were most likely the keys to the box, the main six are figuring it out for the first time, so discussing how they got the keys doesn't feel forced. Plus, by reminding us about all their exploits over the course of the season, it feels even more impactful when we see the ponies whose lives they've changed at the end of part 2. What I consider to be the single worst scene in the entire 2-part episode is actually the first song, You'll Play Your Part. Not only does this scene add nothing to the plot of the episode, but it's also one of the worst songs in the entire show, as well as possibly the most visually boring scene to ever occur in this series. Thematically, the song is meant to convey Twilight's discomfort with her uselessness as a princess, which we already understand by now because she's told us about it several times. It is also an attempt on the part of the other princesses to make Twilight cheer up, which completely fails because she still feels useless up until the point that they actually give her something to do. Most of the songs in MLP either convey something about the storyline and are longer or more thematically relevant, or are short and to the point, existing to make a montage more interesting or to convey an emotion instantly. The song at the end of the finale falls into the latter category, and while it's not one of the better songs in the show, it's still got a catchy hook and a lot going on visually throughout. You'll Play Your Part is completely irrelevant. The lyrics are not catchy or interesting in any way, and the melody just meanders through a track that's longer than than it needs to be. Lyrics like, I want to have a purpose, want to do all that I can, I want to make a contribution, I want to be a part of the plan, feel stiff, awkward, and directionless. As my friend Julian Moon said, these aren't lyrics, it's a shopping list that rhymes. But perhaps the biggest sin that this scene commits is taking place on a bland-ass balcony while the princesses stand and walk around in circles singing at one another. Aside from the weirdly accurate lip syncing, nothing has been done to make this scene visually engaging whatsoever. You know what? I take back everything I said about the fight scene. Leave it in. It's fine. Just take this fucking scene out and do the Discord thing I mentioned instead. Moreover, I can't tell you how sick I am of the princesses just standing around. I feel like every time the princesses are there, we get an excessive amount of frames where all of them are just standing around together, and it does not look right. I'm sure a big part of it is how these 3 tall ponies are standing over Twilight and staring at her, which is creepy in itself, but more than that, it's that all 3 of them have very different and very busy designs that don't mesh well together. It's okay for Celestia to have a regal and highly detailed appearance because when she's alone with regular ponies, it makes her look dominating and glorious. But when you stuff her in a frame with 2 other ponies who look like that, it just makes everything look cluttered and messy. But at this point, I'm down to the nitty-gritty. I feel like every time I find something to like about this episode, it's quickly followed by something to hate. Rarity takes this really clever jab at Rainbow Dash early in the episode for groaning at Spike's boasts. But then Applejack has lines like, as in, Discord, and I think reformed Discord is even more obnoxious than not reformed Discord, and I return my face to my palm. It saddens me a little to end my weekly analysis of this series on such a bittersweet note, but I guess it really captures my overall experience with Season 4 pretty well. For every Mod Pie, Pinkie Pride, Rarity Takes Manehattan, and Bats that got me really pumped about the show again, there was a Three's a Crowd, Simple Ways, or Equestria games to sour me all over again. 26 weeks of episodic reviews has been a truly wild ride, and so much has happened in my life over that period that it's kind of baffling to look back on. But I can say without a doubt that I'm happy to be moving on now and trying my hands at new and exciting things. I really hope you'll stick around and see what I've got in store in the future, as I've been working on a number of experimental styles and breaching several new mediums in the videos that are soon to come. And don't worry, even if my pony content slows down, and even if I don't come back for Season 5, I will always consider myself a brony, and look back on this experience with a fondness in my heart.